Chapter 1869. A clump of yellow soil appeared on the gorgeous temple floor. The floor was so tight that not even a drop of water could seep in, allowing the soil, which was wrapped in a soft yellow glow, to enter the temple without any hindrance. The soil was layered in front of the Dragon Kings. There were no creatures in the soil, but they could clearly feel that the three elements of water, fire, and wind could penetrate it at will. No vitality was better than overflowing vitality. What a pure power of the earth! Alexstrasza was not stingy with her praise. Duque, who was beside the Black Dragon Princess, pointed at the scene. Every intelligent creature has a different understanding of the earth. Sal's current entry point is the bearing of all things by the earth. Onyxia nodded, not really understanding. Sal, on the other hand, was a little surprised. He did not expect Duque to have dabbled in the power of the earth. That's right, he had experienced the meaning of the earth from the collapsing Nagrand. On the collapsed land of Draenor, there might still be wind, water, and fire in Nagrand, but without the support of the earth, everything would only become debris in the void after falling into the void. Sal witnessed the collapse of this ancestral land day after day, and only then did he realize this from the depths of his soul. He did not expect Duque to see through it so easily. Sal bowed slightly to show his respect to the Dragon Kings. He bowed deeply to Duque. This was not out of respect for Duque's status, but Duque's recognition of his way of the earth. It had a sense of, I'm not alone. Alexstrasza clapped her hands to attract everyone's attention. Okay, let's discuss the details of this battle. Please follow me. After saying that, she led everyone to a side hall of the Dragon Slumber Temple. This newly opened side hall was obviously not built according to the size of the dragons. It was 5 meters high, and could only be used by small and medium-sized creatures, such as humans and orcs. On the bright marble floor of the entire side hall, there was only one set of tables and chairs, a circular table with a diameter of 10 meters and more than 10 chairs. The 5 human-shaped dragon aspects took their seats, and Duque, Sal, Queen Sheila, Varian, Muradin, and Lord Howl were also seated. The Red Dragon Queen said, "First, we have to go back 10,000 years ago and obtain the soul of the dragon that has not fallen into the demon's soul. Then, we have to find a way to bring it back to this point in time." Nozdormu said, "I heard the proposal you asked Isra to pass on. I also know that you want us dragons to go back and recharge directly in the past, then return to this point in time to catch Nethario off guard. In fact, we can all go back, but it's not certain when we come back. After the giant dragon soul is charged, it contains too much energy, and I don't have enough power to send it back." Duke suddenly thought of something. Wait, could the soul of the colossal dragon be the combined power of the 5 dragon aspects that surpasses the total power of the 5 dragon aspects of the dragon? It's hundreds and thousands of times greater than our individual power. Alexstrasza gave Duque an affirmative answer. Duque was speechless. He had taken everything into account, but he had missed this point. Of course, he knew that if it was charged at this point in time, it would attract Nethario and his main force. He always wanted to replicate the feat of killing Nethario the first time in the past. Unfortunately, things were unpredictable, and it was difficult to get what he wanted. Nozdormu said, "The dragon's soul exists for a very short period of time. Not long after it was created, it was tempted by Nethario to inject the most powerful energy into the 4 of us from 10,000 years ago and complete the charge. After it was created, Nethario at that point in time would definitely guard it. He would not let us steal it back successfully. Moreover, if 2 identical Dragon Kings appeared, too much power would cause changes in time and space, or even cause it to go out of control. I strongly oppose the multiple Dragon Kings going back together." Duque frowned. "Then, can you get the Dragon Kings to give me a token? I don't expect the 4 of them to believe me at that point in time, at least when I think of a way to sneak attack Nethario and seize the dragon's soul." The 4 dragon kings do not make a move. The 3 veteran dragon kings pondered for a moment. Sure. However, the remaining Calegos could only shrug because the blue dragon king was still Maligos at that time, so there was no other way. At this time, it was Duque's turn to think. How about this, let's change the plan. Only 3 of us will go back, me, Cervantes, and Sal. Huh? Are you sure? Isra asked. Nonsense. It turned out that Sal had taken care of his own strength. It was at that moment that Sal truly embarked on the path of the shaman messiah. Yes, Duque answered affirmatively. Sending the current Duque and Cervantes back won't be too stressful, right? Alexstrasza asked Nosdormu. Nosdormu said seriously, if it were 2 demigods at their peak, it would be very difficult. Duque waved his hand. There's no need. I have mastered the path of demigods. I don't need to rely on a large amount of ready-made magic to exert my combat power. As long as you teleport me to a time node about a month earlier, I can use my own magic net to draw enough magic to fight the dragon aspect. Sal, who was listening, had mixed feelings. A guy like Duque was extremely reliable when he was one of his own. As long as he was given time to complete the preparations in advance, he could definitely make any existence bleed. But when he became an enemy, it would be too terrifying. Nosdormu had no objections to what Duque said just now. Then please be sure to maintain the minimum demigod level before the teleportation and when you are about to return. This will be much easier for me. Because I am still not sure how much the dragon's soul will affect the timeline. Okay. Alexstrasza looked around. Then, Duque, do you need time to prepare? Duque, Queen Sylvanas, and Sal all shook their heads. Duque said instead, it's better to ask if the sleeping dragon temple needs additional preparation work. It is certain that if we make such a big move, Nisario's true body will come to kill us. The core subordinates who serve him will also come out in full force. The Red Dragon Queen pondered for a moment. Then hold on for another week. Okay. After everyone reached an agreement, the meeting was dismissed. A week later, in the Tanaris Desert in the south of the Kalimdor continent, in the Cavern of Time, the humanoid Nosdormu confirmed with the 3 of them for the last time. Are you ready? Yes, the 3 of them answered in unison. Traveling through time and space was a piece of cake for Duque. But for the other 2, it was their first time. And Duque found that it was different from the last time he went back to the past. Nosdormu's hands emitted a dazzling light. This light formed a jet above the heads of the 3 of them, and the bright light beam blended into the void. Just as the light beam formed a ball of light again, it formed an illusory vortex that sucked all 3 of them in. Chapter 1870. After the 3 of them were sucked into the vortex, it began to shrink in the blink of an eye and quickly disappeared. Time seemed to be stuck in a state of stillness. Sylvanas thought she was dead. She felt like she was in a pitch-black world, with no up or down or left or right. The illusory feeling of weightlessness made her panic. It was as if there was no passage of time, and there was no concept of space. The only thing she could feel was that her mind could still function smoothly. She could not breathe, speak, or move. She did not know how long had passed. Perhaps it was a second, or perhaps a century. Even with the longevity and experience of elves, she was a little panicked when faced with a situation where time seemed to have stopped. Am I really dead? Sylvanas could not help but think. At that moment, she felt a warm and familiar touch on her palm, making her aware of Duque's existence. She subconsciously moved closer to him, but it was a pity that she could not even move a finger. Even so, the feeling of her fingers tightly clasped together made her feel very at ease. At that moment, she suddenly heard Nosdormu's voice. Sorry to keep you waiting. The Bronze Dragon King always had a poker face. Even in human form, he rarely showed any expression. He spoke to mortals in a tone that had never changed in 10,000 years. Normally, she would find him boring, but at times like this, he was very reliable. The next moment, other senses returned. Sylvanus's vision was still filled with endless darkness, but fragments of colorful light began to appear in her vision. They were like broken glass, reflecting a blurry light in the darkness. However, the scenes that were being played on these fragments made her feel like she was looking at an incomplete magic mirror. The mirror reflected various scenes. Some of them were scenes that she had experienced in the past, such as the thousands of years she had spent in the Eversong forest. However, some scenes were extremely unfamiliar and shocking to her. This was because she had seen herself die under Arthas's sword in the battle to protect Silvermoon City. Her soul had been captured, her heart had been tortured, and she had become the banshee she once hated the most. Then, she had become the queen of the Forsaken. These scenes appeared and disappeared with the flashing fragments. Until two stable doors of light appeared in front of her, one on the left and one on the right. Queen Sylvie found Nosdormu standing in front of the two light doors. She was holding Duque's hand and hovering in the air on Duque's left. Sal was on Duque's right. The three of them subconsciously stared at the light door, because it seemed like there was another world behind the door, the world of the future. The image of the future was evolving at the speed of 1 day per second. Even so, the three of them immediately noticed a divergence. One of the worlds quickly finished its evolution. It was the Azeroth that was quickly destroyed by Nisario, the Elemental Lords, and the Twilight Disciples. The land was desolate. There was not a single living plant. The ground was littered with the remains of dead humans and orcs. Tens of thousands of years of intelligent life had come to an end. However, the other worlds seemed to have continued. Azeroth seemed to have been destroyed by the combined forces of Nisario and the 4 elemental realms. The Horde was also destroyed. However, a small number of the Alliance's elites began interstellar travel. In the light door, the three of them saw Duque's figure. Duque was commanding the evacuation of the people and soldiers. Some boarded the Drenai's spaceships, while others evacuated directly to an unknown planet through the dark door. After that, the Burning Legion followed like shadows. Duque led everyone to fight and retreat. Although the end result was still destruction, they had at least held on for 100 years. Originally, the three of them wanted to see more, but who knew that Nosdormu would raise his hand? Sylvanus and Sal turned into streams of light and flew backward. Forward was the future. Backward was the past. Nosdormu only left Duque behind. Do you know why I left you alone? Duke Marcus. Nosdormu seemed very calm, be it his voice or his appearance. Duque felt that this bronze dragon king seemed a little excited. As the guardian of time, I have faithfully discharged my duties for 25,000 years. Next, I will tell you a secret. I would not have said it until the end of the world. Duque suddenly felt a little nervous. For the first time, Nosdormu's poker face, which had never changed for 10,000 years, showed an excited expression. As the guardian of time, whether it is the future or the past, everything is within my observation. In the first few years when I started to fulfill this duty, I was extremely excited. Because I could freely observe any part of the past or the future. The unknown past and future satisfied all my curiosity and desire to explore. Unfortunately, after a few hundred years, I got tired of it. I am the guardian of time, and any action that causes a large change in history has to be corrected by me. It is not that I have not tried asking for help from mortals to go back in time to correct history. Often, the price I have to pay is just the most insignificant equipment in my collection, such as excellent or epic grade equipment. As long as it does not affect the course of history, I do not care about any changes in the past or future. This is because the River of Time has a powerful corrective ability, and it is enough to correct most variables. However, a huge variable called Duke Marcus appeared. When I first found out that you changed history, I saw you as a tumor of time that must be removed. At this point, Nozdormu glared at Duque fiercely. Even an experienced person like Duque felt his heart palpitate. Immediately after, Nozdormu's gaze softened. Indeed, I was prepared to observe you for a while before deciding whether or not to eliminate you as a variable. Unfortunately, I found out that I was wrong. The river of time that I followed did not resist the changes that you brought. It seemed to accept everything that you did and was happy to see it happen. I could not accept this change. So before I took action, I decided to observe you personally. Then, I discovered something that shocked me. I knew from your reaction that you actually knew my future. When Nozdormu said this, Duque also felt a faint pain in his balls. As a transmigrator, of course, he knew that the fallen Nozdormu from the future was trying to disrupt the current point of time. Then, in the long river of time, the current Nozdormu and the fallen Nozdormu from the future started a war, and in the end, both of them perished. Chapter 1871. What was even worse was that this incident was about to happen. Nozdormu was absolutely miserable. After he and the Bronze Dragon Legion knew their fates, one by one, they became corrupted and fell. The one who killed them was not someone else, but himself from the future. No matter how hard he tried to change history, he would not be able to reverse the destruction of the future. This was the most despairing thing. Seeing Duque's reaction, Nozdormu had a look of realization. As expected, you know my future. Duke Marcus, can you tell me your true identity? In my eyes, you are an anomaly, a variable that should never exist. I wanted to drive you out of the Azeroth timeline, but I finally realized that it was the world of Azeroth that brought you in order to change the future. This time, it was Duque's turn to be speechless. He had never thought that there would be so many secrets to his transmigration. Nozdormu sighed. To be honest, it was because of that end. I was angry. I fought. I complained. I was in despair. But ever since you appeared and gradually stood at the peak of the world stage, using your wisdom and strength to influence the future of this world, I have new hope. Nozdormu floated closer to Duque. For the first time, he showed an expression that should have been a smile. Hope. Duque resisted the displeasure of having his mind peeped. Don't you want to die? Die? No, no, no. I don't have that concept anymore. What I'm tired of is the unchanging time itself. It's too boring. Duke Marcus, you are already a demigod. When you experience everything in the world, when everything from the unknown to the known, perhaps you will become as bored and empty as I am. 25,000 years of repetitive behavior is too boring. If not for my duty, I might have gone crazy. In the future, I might have fallen that way. So, I'm just eager to see variables. Variables? Yes. As long as I protect this world, I don't mind seeing variables. Because it will bring me joy. Looking at the excited Nozdormu, Duque had a playful expression on his face. Oh. Could it be that as long as it is beneficial to this world and does not affect your duty to protect the world and time, you are willing to make a certain degree of concession? Give in? Nozdormu sneered, who knows how many times. If I hadn't persistently refused any future me who had yet to fall, to enter this timeline, you would have been dead before you became a demigod. Duque immediately broke out in a cold sweat, his heart beating wildly. That's right. In the past, he was too weak, so weak that he had no way to resist the power of a demigod. If a future Nozdormu appeared before he became a demigod and wanted to fix him, he would not be able to resist. One had to know that Nozdormu's main body was extremely powerful. Even a demigod like Nisaria would be slowed down by 20% under the erosion of his time magic. If Duque had encountered him before he became a demigod, he would probably have been directly sent into the abyss of time. Duque bowed deeply to Nozdormu. Thank you very much. I owe you a favor. If there's a chance, I will return it. No. You've already returned it. Nozdormu seemed to be in a good mood. Let me give you a hint, Onyxia. Duque was stunned, and suddenly understood. Just as he was about to say something, Nozdormu laughed and pushed him in the chest. Countless fragments of time turned into streams of light and flashed forward in Duque's field of vision. Meanwhile, Duque himself was violently pulled back by a mysterious force. In the middle of his field of vision, he only saw Nozdormu with a mysterious smile. He raised his right index finger and made a kshu gesture at him. That's what it means to say to Duke, to keep it a secret. It would take a long period of time in the river of time to go back 10,000 years in the past. Duque felt that his entire soul had been stretched into a long noodle shape. Taking advantage of this moment, Duque was thinking about why Nozdormu had said that. He suddenly understood. In the ancient war 10,000 years ago, Nisario had deceived his brothers and sisters and made the 4 dragon kings inject most of their origin power into the soul of the giant dragon. That was how the dragon nuclear bomb was created, which directly turned dozens of demon legions into ashes. The strength of the 4 dragon kings, who had been injected with most of their origin power, had also fallen greatly. It was not until Duque destroyed the soul of the demon, in this life, that the Dragon King's power was restored to its original state. Even so, they were still dragon aspects during this period of 10,000 years. In the original history, in order to kill Nisario, who was in a state of madness and had entered the source of Azeroth, the 4 dragon kings had no choice but to use all their power in the soul of the giant dragon. After all, although Thrall had filled the vacant position and successfully activated the soul of the giant dragon, the power of the dragon aspects could only be extracted from the 4 dragon kings. This directly caused the 4 dragon kings to forever lose the power bestowed upon them by the Titans, and they were demoted from dragon aspects to mortals. Thus, there was a new deduction. What if it was not the 4 dragon kings who injected the power of the dragon aspects into the next battle, but the standard 5 dragon aspects? The power injected would obviously be less than that of the 5 dragon kings in the original history. This obviously gave birth to a new possibility. Perhaps after this battle, the 5 dragon aspects would not completely lose the sacred Titan power. Duque slapped his forehead. This butterfly of mine has done something big again. The so-called butterfly effect is really F*King difficult to deal with. Changing the future certainly represented new hope. In turn, it meant that the history that Duque was familiar with was useless. This was both a joy and a pain in the ass. However, Duque soon laughed. In the past, I couldn't completely change the world, and I wasn't afraid of its backlash. But now I'm different. I've made all the preparations, and the backup plans that should be laid have already been activated. Everything is waiting for the harvest. La la la. In the spring, I plant a wife in the soil, and in the autumn, I can harvest many, many wives. Duque sang a tuneless crooked song as he traveled through time and space and returned to 10,000 years ago. When Duque came back to his senses, he found that his face was crooked. Ah! Ouch, ouch, ouch. If it were someone else, Duque would have directly sent the 5 Fireballs divine sect to teach him a lesson. However, the person who twisted his face was Queen Sylvanas, so there was nothing he could do. Queen Sylvanas? Humph. Tell me, what's going on with that forgotten queen? Sylvanas suddenly showed her might. Chapter 1872. The Forgotten Queen, the Undead Queen, was the chief of the entire tribe at the most glorious time in history. She had always been brave and determined, but who knew that her withered heart also had a soft and fragile side, and that her dried-up tear ducts could also shed sad tears? Who could understand her loneliness? In order to reunite her sisters, she had once tempted Sasha to become the same existence as her. Unfortunately, Sasha had come to her senses at the last moment. When Legion descends, her eldest sister, Aurelia, returned, and the allied tribes joined forces to fight against the Burning Legion. How did she deal with herself? Perhaps it was the sorrow buried in the deepest part of her heart that made the legend of Queen Sylvanas even more touching. Duque's hesitant expression made Sylvanas feel as if she had been pricked by a needle. Her body trembled. "You really know something?" Nozdormu refused to say. "What about you?" There had never been a hero who was really stupid. You could lie for a while, but not forever. Speaking of which, Duque did not really intend to lie to Sylvanas. When he came back to his senses, he found that Sal was not by his side. Duque shrugged. "What do you want me to tell you?" "That Sylvanas and the other parallel to the main world died in the battle to defend Silvermoon? And then continued to exist as the Forgotten Queen?" Queen Sylvanas did not really want to be angry at Duque. It was just that she had seen a few fragments at once, and her thoughts were very confused. She was stunned for a moment. Duque took the initiative and hugged Queen Sylvanas. Without a word, he gave her artificial respiration. Queen Sylvanas did not want to interrupt Duque, but they had been married for so many years, and her body and mind had long been in love. No matter how tough she was usually, once a wonderful switch was touched, her whole body and mind would automatically soften. Love sometimes was like that. After a long time, their lips parted. Duque looked at Queen Sylvanas affectionately. "Silly woman, you think too much." "Yes, I did peek into part of the past and the future, but that was something that happened in another branch of the timeline. What's important is that you're alive and well in this main timeline, and you're the mother of our child, right?" At the mention of the child, the last trace of stiffness on Sylvana's face softened. She subconsciously touched her lower abdomen. Queen Sylvie rolled her eyes at Duque. "Besides, you were already in love with my sister and third sister at that time. No matter what, you can't leave me alone and let me die. Right?" Speaking of this, Queen Sylvie turned her head away from Duque. "Who knows if you knew that I was almost killed and took the opportunity to save the damsel in distress to deceive me." Duque was about to spit. He bared his teeth. Sigh. Women. Why did he like to mess things up? For example, if you come back and deal with Tyrant? Queen Sylvie's beautiful eyes turned. Huh. Where's the trust? He. Duque could only pretend to laugh dryly. Alright, I'm not here to keep an eye on you. I don't have the mood to restrict a man like you to death. Queen Sylvie's eyes revealed a strange light, and she took the initiative to change the topic. Actually, I think we just need to give the dragons a hint. Hint? For example, if the dragon soul is not easy to get, we can make a prototype first. That way, if we steal a finished product, they can quickly modify it and turn it into a perfect dragon soul. After all, the dragon soul can only be used if it is infused with at least a large portion of the 4 dragon aspects power. Without the power, it's just an empty shell. Oh. That's a good idea. Duque changed the topic. Actually, we don't need to hint. We can just look for Nozdormu. Chapter 1873. Queen Sylvanas proposed a new idea. Then I have another question. If Nozdormu knew the future and knew that Nesario had betrayed the dragons, would he still watch the 4 major dragons be deceived? Would he let Nesario betray the law of protection, and he himself would adhere to the death principle of not revealing the future that the Titans gave him? Wouldn't Nozdormu make any decision at any time, but in fact, it would be a decision made in the known future? This sounded a little roundabout and nerve-wracking. In fact, the logic was still valid because Nozdormu's duty was to protect the timeline from deviation. If even he led the timeline astray, then there would be no protection to speak of. However, in reality, only when one became the guardian of time could one know whether this was the truth or not. Duque sighed. Perhaps, this is the sorrow brought about by his duty. Even though he knew that a tragedy was bound to happen, he still had to participate in that terrible tragedy. As a catalyst, he had to play out this tragedy and push his brothers and sisters into the abyss of pain. Phew. Fortunately, I don't have to be the guardian of time. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll go crazy. Windrunner, who loved freedom and refused to be bound, had to do this unchanging job. Queen Sylvanas would probably want to kill herself. Well, our power now is too weak. I can smell the stench of demons in the atmosphere. I guess the Burning Legion has arrived. While the main force of the Legion has not arrived, let's first control the elements in the atmosphere. Okay. Duque was a genuine water and fire dual elemental demigod, and Queen Sylvanas was a wind demigod. After their levels increased, their elemental affinity was also countless times higher. At this point in time, Ragnaros and Al-Akir were still alive, so naturally, they could not extract the elements of the three major elemental realms. On the other hand, because these two elemental lords were in a state of hibernation, no one would compete with them for the three elements of water, fire, and wind in the main plane of Azeroth. This made them feel like weasels entering a hen's nest. The so-called supermarket that they did not have to pay for was so cool. The place where they transmigrated was located in the southeast corner of the ancient Kalimdor continent that had not been blown up, probably near the future Zul'Gurub. Duque and Queen Sylvani's elemental absorption naturally aroused a response from the troll priests of the Gurubashi Empire. Indeed, there were priests who were not afraid of death and led the trolls to investigate, but Duque used a bunch of hands of magic on them, combining the simplest and most violent demigod level, Fireball, into a sickening, meteor shower, teaching the crazy trolls that humans are dangerous. The Burning Legion was currently invading, and the entire central region of the continent was in chaos with Azhara City at the center. No one would care about the remote mountain forests of the continent. The huge troll empire was beaten like a dog. When Duque had absorbed enough elements, he realized that he had gone overboard. I seem to have accidentally killed tens of thousands of the Troll Empire's elites. Duque was speechless. Well done. Queen Sylvia gave a thumbs up. She was simply fanning the flames. Duque slapped his forehead. Back in his time, the Amani trolls had been exterminating for years. It had been so long that he had actually forgotten that the High Elves and the trolls were mortal enemies. By the way, don't you still have 2,000 years before you run into the Amani trolls who have nothing to do with the Gurubashi Empire? Damn the trolls! Queen Sylvani said stubbornly. If I have time, I don't mind going to the Amani trolls again. Duque slapped his forehead. Fine, you have the biggest breasts. You have the final say. After absorbing the elements, they were genuine demigod level again. I found Thrall. Queen Sylvani was a little excited. The wind element told me that he's in the Cavern of Time in Tanaris. Huh. Thrall really has ideas. Duque could not remember how Thrall got the dragon soul in the original history. Clearly, after being teleported to this point in time, Thrall had his own ideas. At the same time, outside the Cavern of Time, Thrall was struggling. He was stopped. He had spoken until his lips were sore, but the Bronze Dragon Legion did not let him in. They did not even want to listen to him and kept driving him out. Thrall felt extremely bitter. This was the disadvantage of not having a good relationship with the Dragon Slumber Temple. This was because Nozdormu had indeed given them a token, but that thing was in Duque's hands. If he returned to 10,000 years ago and did not perform well, then he would still be that insignificant orc in the eyes of the dragons. Just as he was about to reveal some spoilers of what would happen 10,000 years later to attract the attention of the Bronze Draconians, a familiar aura suddenly came from the portal behind him. Duque, Sylvanas, you're here?" Not knowing whether it was melancholy or relief, Sal heaved a sigh of relief. "Well, since everyone is thinking the same thing, I'll leave it to you. I'll help you." Thrall was carefree. He wanted to show off, but that did not mean that he wanted to anger Duque. In the situation where he could not contact Duque, he was free to do whatever he wanted. But since Duque was here, he would be overstepping his boundaries if he acted recklessly. Duque glanced at Thrall and suddenly said, "You know what? What we did 10,000 years ago is very likely to affect 10,000 years later." Thrall was shocked and asked, "Then, what if we go too far? The Bronze Dragon clan will send out pursuers who will use special methods to kill us in the River of Time." Of course, for the original plan, they should send a second group to try to get that thing back. Thrall was silent. Duque knew that he was in a heavy mood, but he still needed to give him a warning. Remember, history may be changed and fine-tuned. What is truly irresistible is the general trend. General trend? What was the general trend? This word could make Thrall think for a long, long time. Only Duque himself knew that this was Azeroth's determination to unite the various races against the Burning Legion. Only by defeating the demon army led by Sargeras could the planet have a way out and all races continue. No matter who it was, if they resisted the general trend, they would only be crushed by the wheels of history. Duque would not tell Thrall. Facing the guardian of the Cavern of Time, Duque gently raised a special badge. Feeling the power of the badge, the bronze draconic man immediately became respectful, and immediately ran to report. A moment later, Duque and the other two were brought to a desolate cave. There was nothing but sand. Suddenly, a huge sand dragon formed in front of the three of them. "Speak. Did the future me ask you to cause trouble at the time node I'm guarding?" Chapter 1874. Nozdormu was still the mighty and domineering sand dragon. His tone was also full of majesty. If Duque was still the newbie who had just transmigrated, he would probably be scared speechless when he saw such a huge dragon aspect. Unfortunately, as someone who had made a name for himself in the hellish world of Azeroth, he had long been used to facing a giant boss and could only see its toes. Duque was not affected by this kind of majesty. Duque was not afraid at all. Beside him, Queen Sylvanas raised her hand, and the three of them were lifted into the air by a gentle wind. They were level with the dragon's head. Hee. 2 demigods, 1 earth messenger. I'm starting to wonder if my future self has a screw loose. Nozdormu's words should be considered self-mockery. Duque curled his lips. No. You should be very clear about when you will really collapse. The Nozdormu of our time still has enough rationality. He does not force things, but he still has hope in his heart. That's why Sylvanas, Thrall, and I are here. Duque took the initiative to mention Nozdormu's collapse. This touched Thrall's nerves, but Thrall remained silent. Nozdormu raised his dragon head and said, "Wait and hope." Yes. Duque was sure. Nozdormu's eyes, which were made of sand, suddenly bloomed with divine light. The huge dragon head nodded. "Very well, I allow you to enter the world of this time. But remember, don't mess around. The other you is also an outsider. At this point in time, I can't predict what will happen when two Duke Marcus come together." The King of Time seemed to be implying something. One mistake and it will become an eternal cycle of time, like a circle that will never stop spinning, and you will never be able to get out. Duque gritted his teeth and thought to himself, fine. 2 transmigrators are scary enough, and both of them are me. This kind of F***king. Just thinking about it is a nightmare. But at this point in time, I should be staying in Ashara City and living a depraved but happy life, right? Duque nodded. I will. As for the giant dragon soul, that thing is indeed being forged. Nozdormu interrupted him. But I won't help you with anything. I'll just quietly supervise you. I am a guardian, not a creator. No one knew whether they were quietly watching Duque act cool or quietly watching Duque court death. Duque sighed. Sure enough, a person with a wild imagination who was good at creating and a person with a rigid mind who was good at repetitive labor were creatures of 2 different worlds. The Nozdormu of this timeline was even more stubborn than the Nozdormu of Duque's original timeline. Being able to do this was a big green light. Face should be given to each other. Since the other party wasn't an enemy, Duque bowed and said, "Thank you very much." Coming out of the caverns of time, Queen Sylvanas and Sal looked at Duque at the same time. What do we do next? Duque tapped his temple rhythmically with his right index finger. If we don't care about the consequences, there are many ways. When Duque said this, Sal was secretly shocked. Those were the 5 dragon aspects. If things went wrong, even Nesario, who hadn't publicly betrayed them, might join in the encirclement. Against the 5 dragon aspects, Duque, are you that confident? Sal felt a wave of shame. It was a difference between heaven and earth. He once wanted to break through to the demigod realm and truly make the tribe invincible. Unfortunately, the situation changed too quickly. Before he had time to break through to the demigod realm, Duque had already cleared the turmoil in the 3 elemental realms and ruled the 3 realms. Anguirus, whom he had to trust, had messed up the tribe. Thinking of this, Sal felt the deepest sense of powerlessness. Duque was obviously creating a new future that even the Time Dragon King, Nozdorm, had never seen before. What about him? Although he used to shout, Lord_Tar, he had always proclaimed the spirit of death. He preached that he would rather die than win, but he had to shoulder the lives and future of more than 1 million of his fellow orcs. When the day came when the Alliance and the Horde faced off, would he really be able to take them down with him? Helplessness and bitterness. This was the deepest feeling in Sal's heart. Duque glanced at Sal and saw that Sal was conflicted, but he couldn't care less about Sal's feelings. If he was just an Alliance player, maybe he wouldn't mind apostatizing and becoming a Horde player. The point was, whether it was Duque or Duke Marcus in this life, he was a human. This meant that he could only consider the future from the standpoint of humans and the Alliance. When the day came when he had to fight Sal, maybe he would pity Sal, but he would never hesitate. Since Azeroth had given him a position, he had to shoulder the corresponding responsibility. In the face of the general trend, there was no room for any hindrance. Duque sighed slightly and retracted his thoughts. Next, I plan to sneak into the Sleeping Dragon Temple and destroy the first prototype of the Soul of the Dragon. As long as I succeed, that guy Nozdorm will definitely suggest making a few more. Anyway, for Nesario, the Soul of the Dragon is only meaningful if the power of the Dragon King is used by the 4 Dragon Kings. Without the power of the Guardian, it's just a platinum disc that can be replicated. Queen Sylvanas and Sal were stunned. Sal was stunned. Wait, what identity are you going to sneak in? Duque glanced at the bronze dragon man guarding the entrance of the Cavern of Time in the distance, and took the 2 of them around a corner. When he was sure that no one could see them, he raised his hand and covered the 3 of them with a spherical curtain of flames. Then, he entered shadow form in front of the 2 of them. Sal was dumbfounded. Oh, no, he was dumbfounded. Queen Sylvanas could not stop giggling. You bastard, this is how you took care of Sister Tyrant? Duke did not reply to her. Instead, he was filled with righteousness, evil. The Burning Legion suddenly heard that the dragons wanted to create an unparalleled artifact to destroy the demon army. Isn't it normal for them to send a powerful demon lord to launch a sneak attack? That's right, the guardian dragons are at war with the demons. Hey! In that case, you'd better be careful. Don't die in the Wormrest Shrine without knowing why, Queen Sylvie joked as she touched her seemingly flat abdomen. Queen Sylvie's subtext was obvious: Duke, you can go and make trouble, but if you dare to mess around, you'll be killed by your own people. My child's father died before he could even make a sound. I'll hate you forever. Duque laughed. Of course, I won't take the risk myself. The point is that a Void Lord attacked the manufacturing field of the Soul of the Dragon, did indeed happen. Chapter 1875. At that time, the Burning Legion was wantonly coming out of Azhara through the portal opened by Du, burning and destroying all over the world. Before the collapse of the ancient Kalimdor continent, the location of the Dragon Sleep Temple was quite close to the center of the continent. The shape of the broken Noscent continent on the map looked like a kidney. The Dragon Bone Wilderness where the Dragon Sleep Temple was located in the middle of the kidney, near the southern part. In addition, the dragons were the vanguard of the anti-demons, so it was normal for the Dragon Sleep Temple to be invaded by demons. On this day, the demons once again attacked the Dragon Sleep Temple. Duque, who was lurking in the front line, saw with his own eyes the dragons guarding the temple encounter the first wave of demons. It was a group of Doom Walkers and Doom Guards. The huge wings gave the Doom Guards and other demons extraordinary flying ability, and they rushed straight to the Dragon Sleep Temple. However, they were immediately attacked, with all kinds of dragons entangling them. The blazing breath made them no longer pay attention to the Dragon Sleep Temple. The green dragons used poisonous breath, and even worse, their ability to control nightmares. At least, Duque and the others saw with their own eyes two high-grade demons suddenly scream and run away without warning, as if some indescribable horror was chasing them. Dumoque wondered maliciously if the one chasing them was Quafu. Quafu chasing the sun. Chasing the sun, isn't that scary? Yes, yes. The battle in the sky was very exciting. The five-colored dragons worked together to attack from the front and back. The blue dragons used their ice magic to slow down the enemy or directly freeze them, while the red dragons used flames to deal with the demons with lower magic resistance, and the black dragons, with the acceleration ability given by the bronze dragons, used their more powerful melee ability to kill and tear the demons to pieces. The five-colored dragons worked together to fight, and the opponents were outnumbered. Almost every 5 dragons of different colors formed a group, working together to deal with a small group of demons that did not exceed 2 digits. They cooperated well, and often the attacks that the enemies thought could cause damage were just like fireflies flying into a flame. But the endless demons did indeed attract the attention of the guardians of the Dragon Slumber Shrine. No one noticed that a blue dragon swaggered into the temple. Well, he was also carrying a blue dragon who was covered in blood and half dead. My brother is injured. Is there anyone from the red dragon race who can help save him? The blue dragon shouted in Draconic. The other temple guards glanced at him and sighed, we can't save him, unless an ancient dragon comes to help. The blue dragon had a look of despair. The hierarchy in the Dragon Slumber Shrine was actually quite strict. The guardian dragons were naturally the highest, and the ones below them were ranked according to their age. Naturally, they were ancient dragons, adult dragons, infant dragons. Below the pure-blooded dragons were the draconians who were more like dragons, and at the very bottom were the draconians. Now that they were at war with the Burning Legion, the red dragons, who were in charge of life, were too busy trying to save the other 4 giant dragons. Where would he find the extra mana to save a lowly draconian? Returning to the embrace of nature and dying in Dragonbone Wasteland was the greatest gift to these subsidiary races. Sure enough, the injured blue dragon breathed his last after a while. The blue draconid who carried him in was grief-stricken, and soon got up to tell the draconid guarding the middle gate. "My brother has a top-secret report for His Majesty Maligos." That was the information he had exchanged with his life. "I request to meet His Majesty in person." The draconid was a little puzzled. "You are," the blue dragon introduced himself. "My name is Dog Shit." "Oh, my primordial dragon language isn't very good." "Maligos, is it? I couldn't tell that your father was a pure-blooded primordial dragon. How did you just mutate?" The draconid sighed. The blue dragon made a gesture of wiping his nose in embarrassment. There were a total of 8 draconids guarding the gate, and one of them nodded. "Wait here. I will rule in primordial dragon. But I don't know if the lord on duty will convey it to His Majesty." With that, the draconid opened a small teleportation gate and went in. After a while, he came out again. "Come this way, Maligos." The blue dragon bared his teeth, feeling that he had been too smart for his own good. The draconid led him into a subspace, through a long spatial corridor, and to a side hall. It was a huge gate that was a full 100 meters tall, with 2 elegant and beautiful adult blue dragons coiled at the gate. The 2 blue dragons opened one eye at the same time and glanced at the draconid and the blue dragon. The gate was magnificently decorated, with a huge blue dragon sculpture of Maligos, the king of magic. When the draconid approached on 4 legs, the gate disappeared without a sound. When the draconid passed through the gate, the blue magic runes on the door frame of the side hall flickered. Those typical Titan runes cast a mysterious light that swept over their bodies. Seeing that the gate didn't respond, the 2 adult blue dragons closed their eyes and continued to pretend to sleep. Entering the side hall, at the bottom of the gorgeous platform that was filled with all kinds of Titan runes and magic screens, a beautiful and elegant blue dragon appeared in front of the 2 entrants. She had crystal-clear blue scales like sapphires, extremely elegant and streamlined body curves, and, before the blue dragon who was craning his neck could see clearly, the massive blue dragon had already cast ultimate transfiguration and turned into a dark elf with blue hair. She had the typical appearance of a night elf, dark green skin and long pointed ears. She seemed to hate facial lines, so she didn't have them. Instead, she wore a set of leather armor with a V-shaped chest. "I'm Telegosa. You don't have to be so tired to talk like this." "Okay, I'm short on time. I hope your information is as important as you say. Otherwise, you know the rules of the Blue Dragon Army." I know. The blue dragon nodded submissively. Then, after the draconid walked away, he leaned in front of Telegosa and whispered, "My dead brother Kidagos accidentally heard a black dragon say that Nesario was preparing to use the dragon's soul to make a trap and snatch the power that originally belonged to the 4 dragon kings." When the blue dragon said this, Telegosa's entire the entire dragon's aura changed. In less than 1/10 of a second, the former elf once again turned into a huge dragon. She let out a deafening roar. "You're not a draconid of the Blue Dragon Army. You are. Who?" With a roar, her huge claws slammed down. Perhaps she just wanted to capture this guy who pretended to be a blue dragon and ask him what was going on. When her claws slammed down, her strength was even a little bit slower. However, as soon as her claws touched the blue dragon man actually fell apart. Chapter 1876. No, to be precise, he turned into a cloud of shadow energy that dragons hated the most, and dissipated with a whoosh. When his figure once again gathered into a whole body, he was already at the door on the other side of the temple. Demon. Be it Tyragosa or the other blue dragons monitoring and dispatching in the side temple, they were all stunned. At this point in time, the first non-Eridan warlock to use demonic power in the universe had yet to be born, and there were no demon hunters or death knights. It could be said that those who used shadow energy were all demons. There were thousands of demons in the Legion, and aside from the famous warring races of Eridan, there were always some strange demons that the dragons did not recognize. In fact, it was impossible to recognize all of them. The Burning Legion had destroyed thousands of planets, and there were many who thirsted for power who were willing to become vassal races, or even dead leftovers like a few kittens. In any case, the Azeroth creatures had determined that those who used dark and shadow energy were enemies, and there was no escaping. Kill him. Tyragosa pushed off the ground with all four limbs and spread her wings, leaping high into the air. She accelerated in midair and pounced at the strange blue dragon person. Beside her, there were also two adult blue dragons that reacted and pounced forward. They were extremely resentful. This was a great humiliation. Allowing the evil demon to cross 5 or 6 layers of defense and sneak into the core area of the Dragon Sleep Temple. Be it the patrols outside, the dragon people guarding the periphery of the temple, the draconians guarding the main door, the adult dragons at the door of the side temple, or even the runic protection circle of the titans, none of them noticed anything amiss. If not for Tyragosa's vigilance, the demon might have even made its way to His Majesty Maligos, and that would have been a nightmare. Unexpected things happened again and again. Originally, the blue dragons thought that this demon, who was disguising himself as a blue dragon person, was going to assassinate Maligos. Tyragosa was thinking about how to stop him from killing his way into the Dragon Slumber Temple's main hall of the King of Magic. Who knew that the other party would play a little magic? It was a vivid illusion. When she and a few other blue dragons rushed over, they were shocked to find that they had been tricked, and the real enemy had rushed in the opposite direction. When they chased after it again, the other party actually used the magic gate of the Dragon Sleep Temple. As Tyragosa rushed through a door she had passed through thousands of times, she was suddenly struck by a violent electric shock. Tens of thousands of volts of ultra-high voltage electricity hit her hard. Although her strong magic resistance offset most of the damage, the electric current that spread all over her body still knocked her down. The unlucky blue dragons at the back started foaming at the mouth and fainted on the ground. Zzz, zzz, zzz. At this time, the entire Dragon Slumber Shrine rang with the alarm of an intruder. In a large hall in the core area of the temple, two ancient red dragons raised their heads vigilantly. After half a second to confirm that it was an emergency alarm that signified that the enemy had infiltrated the temple, they immediately entered combat mode. Go and ask what's going on. Reloraz. The ancient red dragon called Reloraz immediately asked through the magic mirror. After receiving a reply, he turned his snake-like neck. There's trouble at the blue dragon's side. A shape-shifting demon disguised as a blue dragon entered the core zone. No one knows what that demon wants to do, but we have to be on high alert before that demon is destroyed and proves that the Dragon Sleep Temple is safe again. At this moment, the majestic doors of the hall opened with a bang. The one standing at the gate was a blue dragon that looked very small. Careful! Enemy attack! Without another word, the two ancient red dragons immediately unleashed their dragon breaths. Something that left them utterly shocked happened. The other party clearly understood the red dragon's attack patterns very well. Just as they took a deep breath and prepared to unleash their dragon breaths, the blue dragon had already begun to charge. As the two dragon breaths intersected and shot towards them from the left and right, the strange blue dragon leaped high into the air. The giant dragon was certain that that wasn't a blue dragon's movement, it was too light and graceful. He did a front somersault 3,650 degrees in the air, and his tiny body actually seemed to be riding the wind and breaking the waves. Stepping on the rising fire elements, he flew straight towards the center of the hall, where a silver disc was enshrined on a small platform. Not good. Stop him. One of the giant dragons swung its sharp claws, its dark red, sharp claws drawing a piercing gale. The other giant dragon swung its tail, and no one could imagine how the blue dragon was going to dodge that ridiculously wide area attack. Unexpectedly, the blue dragon person actually did an unscientific double jump. As if stepping on the flames of dragon breaths, he dodged the two giant dragons' physical attacks in an unscientific arc. At this moment, the only thing that could stop him was the Titan runic magic circle set up on the platform. The two of them were in despair. The Titan runic magic circle that they had high hopes for was supposed to be the nemesis of demonic creatures. The power of that magic circle was so great that its first attack alone could definitely knock down a mid-tier Void Lord. However, nothing happened. The Titan runic magic circle flickered and shone with a gentle blue light. That was the light that recognized the blue dragon as an ally who was allowed to enter. Impossible! The two giant dragons exclaimed in shock. There was no justice in this world. Just like that, the blue dragon got the platinum disc as if he was performing acrobatics. Time seemed to be completely frozen at this moment by something called fear. Bye-bye. The blue dragon made a gesture of waving goodbye and revealed a human-like smile. Naturally, such a smile was a complete mockery to the two ancient dragons. Without giving them time to react, the blue dragon immediately activated Flash. In the world of Azeroth 10,000 years later, any mage could use this move. But at this time and place, this move had scared away the souls of the two ancient red dragons. Magic was not common in this world, and only the dragons and the high elves truly mastered magic. However, there were many magic restrictions in the Dragon Sleep Temple, which were high-end things on the level of the Titan runic magic circle. Apart from existences on the level of the ancient blue dragon, no other giant dragon could use it at all. Under the double suppression of the Dragon Sleep Temple spatial restriction and magic restriction, even the strongest of the dragon race could only use the most basic melee and dragon breath. This guy who looked like a blue dragon was really going to ascend to the heavens. However, this guy treated the Dragon Sleep Temple as his own backyard and was very familiar with it. The group of giant dragons chased him for 2 circles before losing him. After hearing the news, the 5 great dragon aspects were both shocked and furious. Traitor! There must be a traitor. Malygos was almost mad because the other party had perfectly broken the magic restriction that he had personally set up. This was like slapping his dragon face with a slipper. What did we lose? Alexstrasza asked coldly. A platinum disc that was prepared to be used to make the dragon soul. At this moment, the Earth Guardian dragon, Nesario, looked unnatural. Chapter 1877. For a moment, Telegosa's heart went cold. As one of the ancient dragons, she certainly knew about the top-secret plan of the Dragon Slumber Temple. In theory, there were quite a few dragons who knew that the 5 dragon aspects were going to use the Dragon Soul to create a dragon power nuclear bomb. It was precisely because their conventional combat power was insufficient and the losses were too great that they had to make a big killing weapon to blast the demons. Nesario had informed the Dragon Kings in advance that they had to inject a considerable amount of power for it to be effective. After that, the Dragon Kings would be in a weak state for a long time, so it was necessary to protect them. When the Dragon Kings were doing things, the ancient dragons would naturally help to watch the scene. At this point in time, there were at least 50 ancient dragons of each color who knew about this. Malygos scolded a traitor, but he really did not know how to deal with it. Alexstrasza also felt a headache. Now that a great enemy was in front of them, it was time for the Pentashade dragons to unite. If they really interrogated as Malygos did, it would definitely cause a serious crack in the unity of the Pentashade dragons. Wait! Malygos, before dealing with the so-called traitors and derelicts, shouldn't we first determine the losses? Yes, that should be the case. Being asked by Big Sister, Malygos finally recovered from his state of anger. Is it really just a platinum disc? The Red Dragon Queen asked worriedly. To be precise, because of the invasion of unknown demons, we need to replace most of the temple's magical protection system. At the very least, all the password techniques have to be reset. No one wants a powerful demon to come in and cut off our heads while we're asleep, right? Malygos added. Alexstrasza turned to look at the Black Dragon King. Can we make another platinum disc that was prepared to be used as that thing? Nisario's dragon heart was thumping rapidly. Under the gaze of all the Dragon Kings, he could only show an indifferent expression. Although it's a little troublesome, my answer is that of course it can be done. Before we inject the Titan divine power of the 5 Dragon Kings, that thing is just a tough enough carrier. Then make another one. The Red Dragon Queen decided. This time, brother, after you make another one, I want to personally guard this thing. Malygos took on everything. Alright, as long as you like it. Nisario seemed a little helpless. At the same time, on the peak of the snowy mountain where the Ice Crown Fortress would be built 10,000 years later, Queen Sylvie and Sal finally saw Duque. You succeeded? When the two of them saw the smile on Duque's face, they already had a rough idea of what was going on. They were just making a final confirmation. Duque smirked and took out the platinum disc from his robe that was emitting a magical aura. Around the disc, there was a layer of faint arcane energy enveloping it. When I, your husband, set out, when have I ever failed? Duque chuckled. Then, shall we go back now? Sal asked. Duque shook his head. We'll only mess things up if we bring it back. Then what's going on? Queen Sylvie frowned. He had to admit that even when his wife frowned, she was still so beautiful. Duque smirked. Do you know how the soul of the dragon became the soul of the demon? The two opposites shook their heads. Of course, someone as smart as Nisario wouldn't do anything after the 4 Dragon Kings injected the Titan divine power. He set the trap from the beginning. Just as Duque said, yesterday at this point in time. In the obsidian holy land of the Black Dragons. Nisario grimaced as he peered at the shrunken figure below, only to see that the guy's rising and falling chest was firmly clamped by the stone nails, but the little man completely ignored it as he struggled to get rid of the shackles. The tattered, red and black robe and the gorgeous and dazzling fragments of golden armor hung scattered around his strangely shaped torso. He had 2 goat-like horns on his head, a deep red face, a wide mouth, and sharp teeth that resembled those of a dragon. The pair of purple-black eyes were like 2 dark abysses that wanted to engulf the guy who imprisoned him. Unfortunately, he definitely did not have the power to match the Black Dragon King's will. In addition to being nailed, the long-horned monster was also shackled by thick chains on the ground. These chains had been specially reinforced to fix his hands and feet to the stalagmite. The prisoner's mouth moved a few times from time to time, as if he was shouting something, but no sound came out. However, he didn't give up, especially when he saw the dragon approaching. Immediately, the prisoner's angry, shrill, and incessant curses rang out in the secret chamber. My lord Sargeras will make the black dragons bleed like a river. He will make your skin into a trench coat and wear it. He will feed your flesh to the dogs. He will seal your soul in a bottle forever and torture it wantonly. Nisario blinked and used a spell to make his Void Lord prisoner lose the ability to speak again. In order to capture this mid-tier Void Lord, the Black Dragon King and his subordinates had put in a lot of effort. The Black Dragon King raised his big claw and focused. After a while, a golden light flashed in his palm. The light gradually became dazzling, and even the captured Void Lord stopped cursing and stared at what Nisario had summoned. The golden light was just a sign, and then a disc appeared, still shining with golden light. But surprisingly, its structure was unusually simple. Even the night elves could easily capture a small creature. The disc was like a large ordinary gold coin, wrapped in a round shell that shone brightly. This kind of unexpected design was all Nisario's idea. If he wanted this divine rune to complete its mission, it should be inconspicuous and frightening. He brought the platinum disc in front of the Void Lord to let the fanatical and powerful Eridar wizard see what was waiting for him. However, the Lord showed an indifferent expression. He glanced at the dragon and the disc from head to toe, his eyes full of mockery. Nesario looked at his reaction. The Eridar Lord did not notice the powerful magic in the platinum disc. He was very satisfied because even the most cunning demon lord could not see anything, which meant that the other dragons would not be able to see anything, until they could not turn back and it was too late for regrets. The Earth Guardian dragon flicked its claws, and the disc emitted a golden light that illuminated the demon's forehead. In an instant, a ray of red light dyed his face red. Then, a mysterious rune jumped out of the platinum-colored disc and entered his body with a whoosh. Ah! The Black Dragon King opened his terrifying mouth full of fangs and spoke in a language that could not be heard in the mortal world. Every word was filled with the strongest evil aura, and even the demon shuddered. Chapter 1878. As the Lord of Eridar who had destroyed countless worlds, this was the strangest sound he had ever heard. It was like a perfect piece of music, but also like the whisper of the most beautiful female in the dead of night. It was the language of the gods. As Nesario spoke, the platinum-colored disc began to shine again. The mysterious glazed light shrouded the huge secret chamber, and it became more and more dazzling with every syllable the Black Dragon King uttered. The simple outer shell of the disc could not conceal the brilliance of the divine runes inside. The Lord of Eridar involuntarily opened his mouth to the limit due to the severe pain. A silent cry brewed in his throat, and blood flowed out of his horrified eyes. It was a mixture of blood and tears. His entire body arched backward, and his blue tail slapped the rocks frantically. He was known as a demon in many worlds, but now he was tearing at the mysterious metal chain that bound him as if he was possessed. He used so much force that he even tore off the flesh on his wrists and ankles, causing them to bleed profusely. This was not an escape, but a purely painful struggle. Soon, his skin, muscles, and even bones began to rot. Everything that could be called living tissue fell off his body inch by inch, and finally, like weathered stones, they cracked under the strong wind and fell piece by piece. Even so, his soul was still screaming and wailing. He was not afraid of death, for death could allow his soul to return to the distorted void. However, this kind of evil divine spell that completely absorbed the soul was his true nemesis. Not only was his life withering, but even his soul was distorted into another kind of existence. This even made it impossible for him to activate the death sequence in the distorted void. If the distorted void confirmed his death, it would separate a mass of soul-nourishing substance to nurture his soul and make up for the defects of his soul as much as possible on account of his status as a lord. Now, he was just missing, the evil divine light disappeared, and the runic metal chain that bound the demon lord moments ago was still swaying in the air. The Black Dragon King was like a loving father to his beloved son. He used his 2 claws to gently pinch a rune that emitted gentle waves from the skull, and then recited an incantation, embedding the rune back into the platinum disc. However, Nesario did not know that every detail of this scene had been seen by someone. When Dubois reproduced this scene in front of Queen Sylvie and Sal, both of them were completely shocked, speechless. Sal was finally convinced. "How did you get the surveillance footage and sound of Nesario in the most secret room?" Queen Sylvie also spread her hands. "I'm not guessing anymore. Let's just reveal the mystery." Duque's smile was a little mischievous. "The Obsidian Holy Land is the Holy Land of the Black Dragons. 10,000 years ago, this was the absolute territory of Nesario. There is no doubt about that. But 10,000 years later, the owner of the Obsidian Holy Land is Onyxia." Queen Shi and Sal understood immediately. At this point in time, no matter how sinister Nesario was, he would never have thought that his daughter, whom he had casually created, would occupy his lair 10,000 years later. Furthermore, she had sold her integrity, dedicated her body and mind, and given everything to Duque. Since Duque wanted to come back and cause trouble in the ancient war 10,000 years ago, he would definitely not let go of these details that could determine the success or failure of the entire operation. Before returning, Duque had confirmed with the Black Dragon all the restrictions, magic defense systems, and surveillance systems in the Obsidian Holy Land. Duque smiled and said, "I once thought, why can't the Dragon Sleeping Temple remake a Soul of the Dragon?" The answer is obvious. That's because the Soul of the Dragon was personally created by Nesario. To be precise, he created it within Xotha's evil divine arts. Almost from the beginning, the Soul of the Dragon didn't exist. From beginning to end, there was only the Soul of the Demon. Sal continued Duque's train of thought. We can't just take the Soul of the Demon back like this. Because this thing itself has serious flaws. Queen Sylvie's eyes also lit up. Or rather, the soul of the Void Lord of Eridar that has been transformed and fused into the Platinum Disc is the biggest problem. We don't know what the consequences and changes will be when it passes through the space and time tunnel. Duque gently pressed his right hand on the Platinum Disc. Our task is very important. Seizing the disc is just the first step. We still have to remake the Soul of the Dragon at this point in time. Yes. Remaking the Soul of the Dragon was the biggest reason why Duque spent so much effort to return to the ancient war. He could indeed return with the Soul of the Dragon, after eliminating the Void Lord according to the original history. Alexstrasza and the other 4 dragon aspects, who worked hard to protect the world, would definitely not have any objections to this. But Duque didn't want that. It turned out that in history, Sal was able to sustain that output. Apart from the fact that he was indeed awesome, the original design of the Soul of the Dragon was secretly beneficial to the Earth Guardian. When the 4 dragon aspects fully injected their own and the power given to them by the Titans, Nesario pretended to input his power. His clumsy performance definitely couldn't fool the Dragon Kings other than Nozdormu. The biggest key here was that Nesario had secretly retrieved his power and set up a temporary storage space so that he could retrieve his power when the other 4 Dragon Kings were not paying attention. The Soul of the Dragon was like a nuclear reactor. The power of the 4 Dragon Kings produced a reaction similar to nuclear fusion. Only Nesario's power was not added, so the effect was definitely inferior. Therefore, the Soul of the Dragon had a second layer of trap. That was, he should be able to use some method to forcibly extract more power from the 4 Dragon Kings who had already lost a lot of blood, and further widen the gap between them and Nesario. That was the foundation of the perfect betrayal of the Wings of Death. Duque believed that it was this double trap that was the core element of the 4 Dragon Kings' demise. Only by eliminating these 2 traps could the Soul of the Dragon achieve the goal of eliminating Nesario at this time of the cataclysm, and at the same time, preserve the vitality of all the Dragon Kings to the greatest extent. For this, he needed to secretly learn the production method. The best way was to watch Nesario create the Soul of the Dragon again. He. I don't care if you learned it from N'Zoth, or if you made it at N'Zoth's place. Now that the 4 Dragon Kings are after you, you won't have the chance to go back to some secret place to work. Dumuk sneered. Sure enough, as Duque expected, after Nesario returned to his lair, the Obsidian Holy Land, he flew into a rage in the secret room. Bastard! 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 Could it be a companion of the demon Lord of Tapalas? A demon stealing a demon. What's the use of the Soul of the Dragon? Chapter 1879. At this point in time, Nesario was not that arrogant. He had indeed been driven crazy by N'Zotha's murmurs of the ancient gods, but he did not have the capital to be arrogant. In terms of fighting ability, there were at least 4 others who could fight as well as he could. Little Naizi's true uninhibited love of showing off had to start from his success in tricking his siblings and destroying the hot-headed Maligos and his Blue Dragon Legion in one fell swoop. Now, he was just a scheming Dragon King. No matter how scheming he was, he would not have thought that the magic defense system of his lair had already been completely destroyed by Duze. Duque was also very cunning. He knew that Dragon Kings were very sensitive to things like spying. Not to mention malicious gazes. Little Naizi, who now had a guilty conscience, would immediately give up on recasting the soul of the dragon at the slightest sign of trouble. What Duque used was passive sensing. He used the magic defense circuit of the Obsidian Holy Land to record the fluctuations caused by Nisario's every move in the secret room, and then recreated it in his mind with the system. Perception was a very mysterious thing to say. In fact, it was the same as the human body. When the wind blew, the hair and skin on the surface of the body would feel it. If there was a stove or an air conditioner around, it would still feel hot and cold. No matter how small the movements of such a huge black dragon were, it would still be earth-shaking in the ears of people. And as the Earth aspect dragon, Nisario itself was a high-energy reactive body. As long as the surrounding magic defense system could receive all signals about the inside, it was no different from Duque standing next to Little Naizi and watching him do it. Of course, at this moment, under the gaze of Queen Sylvanas and Thrall, Duque was just a strange person who was meditating like an old monk. Oh, it's starting. Is that so? And it's based on the Titan runic magic circle technique. I see. The characteristics of the other Dragon Kings were removed, and only the parts related to the dragon were absorbed. A reaction furnace made with life, dream, time, and magic that seems to have 5 attributes, but in fact only 4? Is this the genius of Zoth or the genius of Nisario? Just like that, Duque muttered as if he was in a trance for a full 36 hours. It wouldn't take that long to create a simple soul of the dragon. The key was that Nisario needed to capture a strong enough backup demon. If it was just to steal power, there was no need for any demons. If he wanted the platinum disc that contained the power of the 4 dragon aspects to degenerate into an evil divine artifact, then it would be necessary. Nisario was in luck. After all, ever since Maligos freaked out and said that he wanted to find the traitor, the Dragon Sleep Temple focused more attention on the Blue Dragon Legion. After all, it was the Blue Dragon subordinate Draconians and Draconians who made the mistake, and it was also the Blue Dragon's fault that the magic defense system was broken. Big shots at or above the ancient giant dragon level generally believed that the other 4-colored giant dragons did not have that level of attainment in magic. After all, dragons preferred to use their bodies and talents rather than pursue magic at the expense of essentials. The Black Dragon army frequently attacked at the front lines, which was seen as a sign of responsibility. Although a few of Nisario's capable subordinates were a little confused, they still followed the boss's instructions and captured a beginner Void Lord at the cost of a moderately injured ancient giant dragon. Nisario repeated the steps in front of Duque as if he was teaching an experiment. Queen Sylvanas protected Duque, so that Duque could feel more at ease and turn on the system genie at full power, analyzing the role and reaction of each rune and divine incantation. Finally, 16 hours after Nisario's success, Duque let out a long sigh. I know what to do. What do you want us to do? Duque turned to Sylvanas first. First of all, your task is to isolate your aura. I want you to provide a complete aura shielding array for us to modify the soul of the demon at the location of the Ice Crown Fortress in the future without alarming the Dragon Sleep Temple and Al-Akir. Queen Sylvanas frowned. It's going to be quite a commotion, isn't it? Why does it have to be here? Because the real source of the magic ley line here is the Well of Eternity. Although the Well of Eternity has shut off the output of magic to the outside, it is actually only the main ley line that is closed. There are still some small magic tributaries that form the hidden magic ley line. I can't rebuild the magic net at this point in time during the ancient war, so I can only use the ready-made ones. What about me? Sal asked. Your task is more important. I will teach you how to modify the soul of the dragon. Take note, this thing is about as difficult as you using a tomahawk to operate on a mosquito. Although your failure will not cause any big explosion, I will have to forcibly snatch the soul of the dragon again. History will even change greatly because of this. At that time, Nosdorm at 2 points in time will definitely find trouble with us. I will try my best. Sal was quite calm. Duque looked up. The last thing is the timing. We have to choose when the 5 Dragon Kings inject power into the soul of the dragon. Only then will the 5 Dragon Kings not have a chance to cause trouble. Okay. The two responded in unison. The history of the ancient war seemed to be continuing according to what a certain someone was familiar with. The Burning Legion, which was endless and of incomparable quantity and quality, began to gain a greater advantage on the battlefield. While the 5 Dragon Kings were preparing to inject power into the soul of the dragon, Duque No. 1, who was playing Infernal Affairs, was busy having sex with Tyrant. And now, Duque No. 2 was setting up a backup plan. Finally, the historical moment arrived. A terrifying energy wave, just like history, came from the Dragon Sleep Shrine. Even though they were far away, Duque and the other two could still clearly feel a huge force brewing. This naturally attracted the attack of the demon army. Tens of thousands of Terror Guardians and Doomsday Guards rushed towards the Dragon Sleep Shrine. Bright lights and shadows flashed everywhere in the sky. Be it the demons or the giant dragons, they all fell down like dumplings. On the platform at the top of the Dragon Sleep Shrine, Nesario, who was pretending to inject power, suddenly felt his heart palpitate. He exclaimed a name in his heart, Tapalas. The name of that demon lord. The soul imprint that he had engraved in the demon's soul was erased. At this moment, in the deepest part of a huge ice cave that should have become the Ice Crown Fortress, Sal looked at Duque with some trepidation as he skillfully manipulated the power that should have belonged to the Burning Legion. The power of shadow seemed to be dancing on Duque's fingertips. Duque easily and perfectly dissected the demon's soul that had gone deep into the platinum disc rune magic circle. Chapter 1880. Dumuk poured cold water on Sal's head and told him that there were only 2 beings on the entire planet who had the original Titan runes. One was the current Blue Dragon King, Kalegos, and the other was Duque. Without the permission of the Sleeping Dragon Temple, Duque wouldn't even let Sal see it. The 2 ancient dragons immediately agreed and flew towards the mountain where the Ice Crown Fortress would be located in the future with more than a dozen adult dragons and a group of young dragons. Of course, he longed to master this magical and sacred power, but Duque had no intention of teaching him. He was captured purely to work for him. This was the Ice Crown Fortress in the future. There were actually several caves leading from the snowy peak to the underground. Later, Zul and Arthas, who became the Lich King, ordered the Cryptarachni to dig and reinforce the caves, eventually forming an underground passage connecting the Ice Crown Fortress and the northwest of the Dragonbone Wilderness. The entrance of the passage was the famous Gate of Divine Wrath in the future. Not only did Duque give the platinum disc to Sal, but he also snapped his fingers and directly projected a magnified projection of the platinum disc in midair. The 2 dragons approached the mountain cautiously, one in front and one behind. Queen Sylvanas immediately understood. When Nasristas approached the snowy peak, he was the first to find a problem. "Brother, did you notice that the elements here are a bit abnormal? That's also a relief for me. You will never imagine how insidious and vicious Nesario, who claims to be the guardian of justice and this world, is." This was simply venting. This Eridar demon vividly described the brutality and despicableness of the Black Dragon King. After a series of actions similar to a toothpick picking his teeth, Duque announced, "Okay, this thing is clean, it's up to you now." This amount of work had long exceeded the imagination of mortals. "Sal, you need to change the circuit here. Then, replace the Titan runes here, here, and here with these runes. Note, these are Titan runes. The smallest rune is made up of thousands of small runes that are constantly rotating. You need to use the power of the earth to replace these few key runes." Nasristas frowned. "It's a bit narrow here, send a young dragon to take a look first." After doing it continuously, Sal felt that he was very much like the old orc grandmother next door who specialized in sewing holes in his clothes and repairing his armor when he was a slave gladiator. Ha, oh, okay, what? He actually has Alexstrasza's dragon seal token? Forbid the Red Dragon clan from approaching that place? What made Sal grumble the most was still the Titan runes. Thrall and Queen, she looked at the soul that they should have loathed and hated. Before the explosion of the Well of Eternity, this place was a land of extreme cold. Pure white snow covered the Dragonbone wasteland and the surrounding mountains all year round. However, because Duque's modification of the dragon soul required him to gather the mana from the surrounding ley lines, the flow of mana naturally generated some heat. It was a very strange voice. It was coming from the soul of a Void Lord. "You're welcome. We're about to destroy you," Queen Sylvie said with a straight face. In fact, what Sal had to do was similar to carving flowers for a cake. Mixing flour, putting seasonings, throwing the oven to control the fire, and so on had nothing to do with him. It was just that Duque extracted the key Titan rune spells and asked him to replace them with a specific rune combination. "Duque, there's a situation." As the demigod of wind, Queen Sylvie was the first to sense the arrival of this strong scouting team long before the dragons discovered the three of them. "Huh. I've lived here for tens of thousands of years, and I didn't know there was a natural cave here." Although Duque had explained the key points to Sal early in the morning, and Sal himself had secretly practiced countless times these days, when it came to the real thing, Sal's forehead was still sweating. Now, what Duque wanted Sal to do was almost the same. "Nasristas, Vangastas, you two take your teams to the snowy peak in the northwest to take a look." For some reason, the magic circuit that should have dried up shows signs of gathering. Now that the Wormrest Temple is at its most critical moment, and the Dragon Kings can't move, we can't let go of any dangerous factors. If someone builds a large magic circle there to deal with us, it'll be bad. It doesn't seem like it. Those damned air elementals are quite irritable, and they don't know how to hide their tracks. They shouldn't be ordinary air elementals. No matter how Duque and Sal did their research, no matter how hard Queen Sylvie tried to hide her presence, the Wormrest Temple still detected it. Terranistas, this was a dragon who, after 10,000 years, because of self-blame and illness, and in order to seek justice for the Alliance, voluntarily died. After his death, his head was hung in the Iron Furnace Castle Adventurer Hall. At this point in time, he was still alive and well, and he was Alexstrasza's first assistant. "No matter who you are, and no matter what your intentions are, I want to thank you for getting me out of this damn thing," Lord Eridar's soul said. This heat melted the ice and snow on the mountain peak, revealing the mountain path to the underground cave where Duque and the others were. Sal also tried to secretly learn some tricks or something, but he found that he lacked something very important, the primitive Titan runes passed down by the Titans. After Duque and the others listened for a minute, Queen Sylvie gave Duque a look, and Duque casually destroyed this Eridar demon. The bitter Sal could only work. A dragon's claw print was like a human's fingerprint. Every claw print was unique. When the two primordial WYRMS in their human forms saw the dragon seal writ at the entrance of the underground cave that contained supreme life force, they were a little dumbfounded. Vangastas nodded. "Yes. There seems to be more wind elementals, and less other elements. The Wormrest Temple's dragons really deserve to be called local dragons if they didn't have the ability to sense such a big change in the ley line. It didn't take long for the young dragon to return, bringing with it some strange news. Duque scanned it with his senses. It's okay, Plan A. For example, this was like stuffing a polar bear into a child's sock. Of course, it was impossible, but there were ways to get rid of it. For example, the whole bear could be burned in the incinerator, leaving only ashes. Then, according to a magical 1-1-1 formula, something could be added and stuffed in. While the 5 Dragon Kings focused on infusing energy, he was the temporary manager of the Wormrest Temple. Wind Elemental Realm? This was Sal's contribution to saving the world. If he didn't do it well, the tribe might be destroyed later. Sal couldn't ask for more. It was annihilation on the spiritual level. Perhaps this guy's remaining soul in the twisting nether could resurrect him. Unfortunately, because there were no soul fragments to return to the twisting nether, this guy didn't even know who killed his body. Chapter 1881. In the name of Alexstrasza, the guardian dragon of Azeroth appointed by the titans of the Pantheon, I declare that this place is forbidden to the Pentashade dragons. Anyone who trespasses this place without the Dragon Seal scroll personally issued by me will be considered a declaration of war against the Dragon Slumber Temple. A series of large, flamboyant words were written with claws. The words were written in 3 languages, Draconic, Elvish, and Troll. When the 2 ancient colossal dragons saw these words, they were dumbfounded as well. Of course, they could feel the abnormal energy fluctuations in the depths of the cave. But they were more troubled by the warning signs. There's definitely something wrong inside. But that's still Her Majesty's handwriting. That strong aura of life has a faint sense of destruction. There's no way it's wrong. Then what do we do? This is too big. I'll go back and report it to Terranistas personally. You stay here with the other dragons. After returning, Terranistas also had a huge headache. The magic fluctuations there were too strange, too abnormal, and there had to be such a thing. It was simply asking for the dragon's life. Left with no choice, Terranistas found the second-in-command of the various dragons and explained the situation. He said to the Blue Dragon Queen, Syndagosa, and the second-in-command of the Bronze Dragon, Anachronos. Now that the 5 Majesties are at the most critical juncture, as jointly appointed by the 5 Majesties as the acting chief of the Dragon Slumber Temple, I give you an order. Ignore Her Majesty Alexstrasza's Dragon Seal scroll in the cave, and lead the special forces into the deepest part of that strange cave to find out what's going on. I'll bear any responsibility. There was nothing wrong with this order, and the Pentashade dragons were indeed uneasy and worried, so Syndagosa and Anachronos accepted the order. They brought their personal guards, as well as the elite selected from the Pentashade dragons. In total, there were 11 ancient dragons, 100 adult dragons, and nearly 1,000 dragonmen and half-dragonmen. They ignored the Dragon King's Dragon Seal scrolls one after another and charged into the belly of the mountain in one go, only to be hit. This is His Majesty Isera's. Snore, yes, Syndagosa, Anachronos, and the other dragons were all F***king asleep. Their necks intertwined, and their claws tangled. If it was a human, this might be a very dirty scene. For the dragon race, this was just the inevitable result of Isera's personally made magic tools. Deep in the cave, Queen Sylvie was a little nervous. Duque, are you done? Don't rush me. It's about time. No. The main reason was that the 3 great dragon kings had given us were almost all used up. If they don't give up and continue to charge down, I'll make my move. Don't blame me for changing history then. Calm down, I still have illusions. Duque replied to Queen Sylvanas. Before he came, Duque asked the three dragon kings for the keepsakes and explained their uses. The three veteran dragon kings were very cooperative. Thinking about the fact that their old subordinates might be killed prematurely when they returned to the ancient times, they handed over non-lethal items. In fact, Sindagosa and the other dragons were a little apprehensive when faced with such a move from their leader. If Duque were to make a move, the immediate effect would be good, but the problem was that once the dragons woke up, they would think that this was a shameless trap set up by outsiders using the three dragon kings as a cover. If they had no scruples, they would suddenly advance. Duque could not guarantee that Maligo's wife would not die prematurely. There was a huge difference between Nisario killing the Blue Dragon King's wife and Duque killing his wife. Fortunately, this was Duque's plan and game. Just as the suspicious dragons, who had been tricked by their Dragon King 10,000 years later, carefully crept into the belly of the mountain, they found that the mountain was long gone. Just as Duque and the other two were secretly stirring up trouble in the ancient war, a muffled thunderous sound alarmed all the intelligent creatures on the south coast of Northrend. At the Moyaki port on the southern coast of the Dragonbone Wilderness was the settlement of the Kerouark walruses who had lived there for generations. The walruses walking upright were alarmed by the sound. They were originally holding a grand fishing competition, a special event to dispel the terrifying atmosphere of the cataclysm. This fishing competition even attracted the soldiers of the Scarlet Cross. As a measure of the Alliance's control of Northrend, an entire mechanized infantry division of the Scarlet Cross was ordered to be stationed in the southeast of the Dragonbone Wilderness. The Alliance was even allowed by the Dragon Slumber Shrine and the Green Dragon King Isra to build a military base called the New Hearth Valley next to the Emerald Dragon's sacred land. But at this moment, be it the walruses or the human soldiers, they all looked up at the southern sky. At first, they only saw thick, cotton-like clouds on the farthest end of their field of vision, on the island called the Ancient Beach. Suddenly, a terrifying roar came from the frozen sea, causing everyone's body to involuntarily tense up. Look! The color of the sea has changed. After someone exclaimed, everyone realized that the shallow sea that was originally lighter in color seemed to be shrouded by a huge shadow. Not good. Retreat! Retreat! Everyone retreat from the coast. It must be Nisario. There were already some more eye-catching Alliance soldiers shouting, calling for their subordinates and walruses to retreat. But the next moment, a deafening roar burst out from the bottom of the sea. It sounded like an extremely low and muffled groan, but it was definitely not a simple sound. It was the soul roar of the strongest ancient beast. The sea around the ancient beach suddenly erupted. It was a huge water column with a diameter of more than 10 kilometers. It gushed up from the deepest part of the sea, easily tearing the atmosphere apart. The Alliance soldiers were all thrown to the ground by the shock wave brought by the huge wave. The soldiers turned over or rolled around in a sorry state, forcing themselves to look south. Unfortunately, this time they saw a hellish scene. The ancient beach that almost occupied the entire field of vision had disappeared, replaced by a huge whirlpool that made everyone's scalp tingle. It was as if the big whirlpool between the eternal existence and the endless sea had moved here. Everyone knew that was not the case. If there were geographers here, they would tell everyone that this was a tsunami and whirlpool brought about by the sudden movement of the seabed plates. Unfortunately, there were no geographers here. Everyone's eyes were attracted by the huge rocks that were ejected from the huge whirlpool. The huge rocks smashed towards the southern shore of the Dragonbone Waste like raindrops. Of course, those were not rocks at all, nor were they the deadly hellfire rain released by the Eridar warlocks. They were earth elemental giants that emitted a strange elemental glow. Chapter 1882. A large number of earth elemental lifeforms have been discovered. The enemy has airdropped earth elemental lifeforms in a cannon-like manner. 2,000, 3,000. 5,000. Unable to count, the rough estimate is over 10,000. The Wormrest Temple has sent a request for help. As the two largest bases in Northrend controlled by the Alliance, Utgard Castle and the Fearless Fort each had different functions. The Fearless Fort, located on the edge of the North Wind Tundra in the southwest of Northrend, was an offshore fort very close to the shore and also a deep-water port close to the sea. Because of the open coastline, it was the Alliance's largest import and export trading port in the north. By encircling the sea and building a breakwater, it became the location of the Alliance's North Sea Fleet. A surface fleet consisting of 181 destroyers, 40 cruisers, and 12 battleships, in addition to the 44 flying battleships arranged on the northern coast of the Fearless Fort, formed a powerful mixed fleet. As for Utgard Castle, located in the center of the Howling Fjord in the southeast of Northrend, it was transformed into an air base that could be connected through the Dagger Sheath Bay and was surrounded by mountains. Usually, there was only a medium-sized flying battleship stationed here, and the number of ships never exceeded 100. But ever since the Alliance occupied Northrend, this place was built to accommodate 2 standard flying battleships of the Alliance. At the time of the Throne Conference, the Alliance leaders didn't understand. From a common-sense point of view, Northrend no longer had any so-called enemies. The world's 2 most powerful guardians, the Wormrest Temple and Otter, were here. The only enemy that could be considered the Scourge had been erased, and even the current Lich King was on their side. Even if Duque only requested that the several air bases built around Utgard Castle only have berths and not too many supporting facilities, this still made the Alliance leaders puzzled. After all, leveling the land, paving roads, reserving fuel cabins, setting up security areas, sentry towers, and other things would still cost money and manpower. Naturally, Dumuk had his own halo before becoming a demigod, and he had repeatedly proven his foresight, making his name as the Peeper of Fate even more resounding, so no one really opposed it. In any case, even the cost of building the base was paid by the Marcus family, which would be deducted from the Alliance's membership fees. Duque said that if the base couldn't be used, then this debt wouldn't need to be paid by the Alliance. But everyone knew that a certain due would never make a loss. With the arrival of the new Great Maelstrom, Utgard Castle and the Fearless Fortress became the front lines of the battlefield. In the Fearless Fortress, all kinds of alarms were ringing, and the latest magic surveillance mirror kept outlining the enemy's silhouette. More than 1,000 Earth elemental creatures have been discovered at the bottom of the sea, the monitor shouted. Don't worry, that's the job of Vasht's underwater troops. Muradin Bronzebeard was very calm. Unless Vasht sends a request for help, we'll block the news from that side. Understood. Immediately after, new intelligence came. 3 Neltharion clones were found, plus a group of Twilight dragons, 800 adult dragons, 3,000 baby dragons, and the number is still increasing. Distance, 32,000 meters. Muradin tugged at his well-groomed beard. There are no dragons to cover us this time. Muradin turned to the 2 magic mirrors. Bulang, my good brother, do you think we should take that thing out? Bulang smiled and nodded. Second brother, without the help of the Wormrest Temple this time, if we wantonly deplete someone's griffins, he'll go crazy. Kudrin in the mirror next to him had a straight face. I only have 5,000 griffins, and it's 10 to 1. If you want to use the luminous barbarian dwarves, just say it. Muradin shrugged. Then use it. Anyway, Duque isn't here, so we have the final say. Everyone, listen up, switch to tungsten core armor-piercing bullets. The order was quickly passed down. Whether it was the fleet, the cannon positions of the Fearless Fortress, or the Naxxrama's flying fortress not far to the west of the Fearless Fortress, all the gunners got busy. Although both kinds of shells were placed nearby, it was still a mess to switch. When the Twilight Dragons entered within 10,000 meters of the line of defense formed by the 2 fortresses, thousands of cannons roared almost at the same time. Thousands of shells, because of the faint holy light contained in them, showed beautiful golden lines as they streaked across the sky. The trajectory of the shells was like a fireball that swept across the sky at high speed, dragging a long tail of flames that intertwined with each other. The tail quickly disappeared at the end, and the front kept elongating. One after another, layer after layer, it was as beautiful as the fireworks at the Winter Veil Festival. Before the war, every Twilight Dragon was told that the human cannons were useless. At most, the unlucky ones who were hit by too many shells would die, and nothing else, just a little pain. But when the massive number of shells poured down on the bodies of the Twilight Dragons like raindrops, it immediately caused an effect beyond the imagination of both sides. The shells, which were thought to be just a powerful toy, clearly had the same shape as before, but it seemed to be injected with a completely different mysterious power. With a higher level of mystery, it crushed the defense of the dragon race, which had run rampant in Azeroth for more than 25,000 years and had not been effectively broken. The tungsten core armor-piercing shells easily pierced through the dragon scales and skin. After entering the muscle tissue, they seemed to have a life of their own and came to life. Pieces of shrapnel tumbled, and the purple dragon scales, skin, and even muscles were blown up by the explosion. Although there was no result of death unless it hit the dragon's head, even if it hit the chest, there were too many shells. The continuous explosions formed a scene in the air that looked like the end of the world. There were purple fragments flying everywhere, and dirty flesh and blood formed a scene like rain. Even the Alliance officers who were observing the results of the battle were almost stunned by the scene in front of them. The explosion caused by the terrifying volley turned the entire space with a diameter of 3 kilometers into a dead space. Originally, in order to avoid collisions, the distance between the Twilight Dragons was a little scattered. Now it was even more scattered. After a round of cannon fire, a sieve-like flying formation was exposed in front of the Alliance army. 3 Neltharion clones are alive, and the number of Twilight Dragons has been reduced to 29%. The monitor summarized the monitoring results immediately. Kudrin curled his lips. The Wildhammer dwarves can handle those little dragons. Come on, it's not to the point where you have to sacrifice yourselves, Bulang complained. The weakening of the role of mid-level magical beasts such as griffins, hippogriffs, and dragon hawks on the battlefield was, in a sense, also caused by the changes of the times. Using the Twilight Dragons as opponents was too strong for the griffins. Basically, the griffins could only form teams to deal with the young dragons. Anything higher would not necessarily succeed even if they used their lives. Chapter 1883. Muradin decided, 2 more rounds of volleys. Leave it to the other troops. A volley of cannons was good for dealing with densely packed enemies, but it would be a waste if the number of enemies was too small, or the spacing was sparse to a certain extent. Firing a volley of cannons was fun, but it was a pity that a round of cannons with nearly 10,000 shells would consume a kingdom's entire month's tax. No matter how Duque controlled the cost, even if he reduced the raw materials to almost free, the labor costs needed to produce the shells could not be eliminated and still had to be accounted for. There were cannons 5,000 meters away. For example, Naxxramas began to fire the new Longsong cannon, Death's Whisper, which had a caliber of more than 1,000 millimeters. At the same time, the Fearless Fortress below also began to drag out the Gustav cannon, which had shone brilliantly in the Wrath of the Lich King. A Longsong cannon of more than 800 millimeters, no matter how much of a break was installed, would cause an earthquake after firing. However, it was undeniable that the shells fired by this powerful Longsong cannon were the greatest nemesis of Neltharion's avatars, which had a strong vitality. No matter how Neltharion's avatars healed their injuries, in the face of absolute destructive power, as long as they were hit, they could only type GG amidst laughter. Of course, if they could hit, the avatars were generally more than 100 meters long, but 20 kilometers away, they could not be seen even with binoculars. Hitting a 100-meter-long thing from 20,000 meters away was like using a cannon to hit a mosquito. Hitting it was like losing everything, but not hitting it was the right thing to do. Since Wing's avatars also had decent mobility, they could often only be calibrated remotely and then fired. Rather predictably, Naxxramas had 12 main cannons of the Grim Reaper model, and Gustav had 20. There were 8 Gustav on the Fearless Fortress. The battle continued, and the enemy air force that was still unrelenting within 5,000 meters was handed over to the new members of the alliance. I, Aurelia Windrunner, in the name of the Wind Elemental Queen, Sylvanas Windrunner, order to attack and destroy those wyverns. In the sky, the valiant big sister Windrunner raised her bow. Within a radius of several kilometers around her, countless small tornadoes rushed towards Wing's avatars and the Twilight Dragons. This was the advantage of the Alliance controlling the Wind Elemental realm. As long as he controlled the Wind God throne, there would be new Wind Elemental creatures born out of thin air at every moment. Wind Elemental creatures, or simply called Air Elementals, didn't possess a particularly high level of intelligence. Even so, they had basic intelligence and could only identify Wind Elementals and other creatures. As long as they were given a restricted fighting area, they would be great helpers on the battlefield. Without fear or hesitation, the air elements of various sizes swept towards the Twilight Dragons and engaged them in battle. One of the three-headed avatars was unlucky enough to be hit by 2 Gustav cannons, and it was blown apart in the air. The remaining 2 fought Aurelia, Lilith, Hageron Brightwing, and other elven rangers. The Windrunner family and even the Rangers of Sin Dorii were the perfect example of, when a man achieves the Tao, his fowls and dogs follow him to heaven. After obtaining the share of the wind element, Queen Sylvanas distributed a small portion. Any general among the Blood Elves could fly. Eat my arrow. Aurelia drew her bow and knocked an arrow. A seemingly simple, aimed shot, enhanced by the wind element, had the effect of the fortress's main cannon. The arrow blasted a bloody hole big enough for a carriage to pass through on the thigh of Nesario's avatar. The 2 avatars fought fiercely with the Blood Elven powerhouses. Only a small number of Twilight Dragons could break through the obstruction of the Air Elemental Army and reach the range of the Air Fleet's anti-air artillery. Tungsten-core armor-piercing bullets were not only used for large-caliber artillery. The Alliance also had them for small and medium-sized artillery of 40 mm and above. These miserable Twilight Dragons had to face the baptism of an even denser metal storm. Only the luckiest ones could break through the barrage of the anti-air artillery and fight Kudrin's griffins with their handicapped bodies. The battle situation in the Utgard castle was similar. It seemed that after being besieged by the Alliance and the Sleeping Dragon Temple, Nesario's side had also begun to improve. This was not a harassment battle, but a formal full-scale invasion. The offensive here was a standard air and ground coordination. Hundreds of thousands of earth elemental creatures were launched from the broken straits near the western part of the Howling Fjord to the plateau. After they landed, they turned into human forms and marched toward Utgard Castle in a wave-like manner. Above their heads were thousands of Twilight Dragons circling, and they were going to attack Utgard in unison. This kind of three-dimensional attack made it impossible for the Alliance to defend with air or land forces alone. Unlike the Fearless Fortress, all the Earth elemental creatures were intercepted by Vashj's deep-sea troops. The Alliance here had to rely on themselves to deal with the Earth elemental giants shot out from the maelstrom. Of course, because they were fighting on the plateau, the Alliance was able to deploy a large number of ground artillery groups. At the forefront was the Alliance's tank group, with more than 2,000 new diesel tanks. Not only were they equipped with anti-freeze oil, but they also began to warm up under the engine's corresponding lower armor after receiving the alarm. When the Twilight Dragons had not yet flown to the plateau of the Howling Fjord, all the tanks had finished warming up. If they used tanks to deal with the Twilight Dragons, they would definitely die miserably, so every tank was prepared with standard tank fortifications. The tank fortifications were generally divided into two sections, one for shooting, the other for concealment, and there was a passage at the back, which was a slope. In the shooting section, the turrets could be exposed to carry out observation shots. In the concealment section, the entire vehicle including the turret was below the horizon, and the rear passage at a 30-degree angle could be used to evacuate the fortifications and carry out maneuvers. Standard tank fortifications need to be carefully camouflaged, and must not reveal new soil. Nearby vegetation must be transplanted for camouflage to avoid being identified from a distance, and camouflage nets must be hung in the concealment section to avoid being discovered by aerial reconnaissance. A dwarf tank recruit repeatedly read the tank manual that was issued a month ago, and after reading it, the veteran next to him interrupted. "Kid, I've been serving in the Lightning Tank Regiment since the era of steam tanks. The tank manuals issued by the higher-ups are always so effective, and they are all written by our Alliance commander. But every Alliance general I know told me that Duke Marcus has never entered the cockpit of any tank. I can only say that our commander is a genius." Chapter 1884. Ugh. The recruit scratched his head. Remember the contents of the manual, it can save your life. It can also give you a few more medals on your chest. A few more stacks of bounty money in your pocket. The veteran smiled to relieve the pressure on the recruit. At this moment, the lookout shouted, "The enemy is within visual range." The recruit immediately placed his hand on the safety switch of the tank cannon nervously. At this moment, the dwarf, who was both a veteran and a commander, held him down. "What are you nervous about? The Alliance will never let the tanks fight the first wave. Infantry and cannons work together, we are considered infantry." As expected, the deafening sound of cannons bombarding came from the direction of Utgard Castle. Armor-piercing rounds and Type 3 rounds were not inferior to the momentum of the fearless fortress. They hit the Twilight Dragons head-on, directly crippling the enemy's air force. As Utgard's side was supported by the floating city Dalajan, the range of the magic cannons was relatively shorter, so the density of long-range artillery fire was definitely not as high as that of the fearless fortress. Therefore, the Alliance had deployed more flying battleships here, and they were all the latest dual-system flying battleships. There was no need to talk about the second-generation diesel propellers. The key was that the flying battleships were also equipped with the same anti-gravity arcane levitation system as the floating city Dalajan. It was completely driven by the magic transmitted by the magic net. It was said that the third-generation flying battleships also had a wind acceleration system. It was simply unimaginable how fast those things could fly. The improved Royal Brothel Group directly taught the dragons how to behave with an exaggerated hit rate. However, the main point here was the endless flow of earth elemental creatures flying to the plateau. William, who was in charge of Utgard Castle, gave the order for the tanks to fire freely after the heavy artillery plowed through the enemy's front line. "Open fire," the leaders of the various tank teams roared almost simultaneously. The various commanders further emphasized, "Aim at the chest, the core of the earth elemental creatures is the key. If you can't destroy their core, these guys can replenish their bodies by absorbing the surrounding soil and rocks." The tank cannons hidden in the various tank fortifications let out an even more deafening roar. The long-range bombardment only covered an area. For the thick-skinned earth elemental creatures, the real damage was often less than the 88mm cannon of the Alliance's newly developed Tiger tank. Using the new tungsten core armor-piercing projectile, it could reach an armor-piercing depth of over 110mm at a distance of 2,000 meters. Earth elemental creatures were just rocks that were slightly harder. There was no way they could resist the insane armor-piercing bullets. Bang! 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 This was very much like shooting practice, and they were all moving targets, but there were too many earth elemental creatures. They were so turbulent that they easily opened up a battle line of more than 100 kilometers on the plateau of the Howling Fjord. If one were to look from left to right, they would not be able to see the end. The tens of thousands of cannons that the Alliance had set up here were firing almost non-stop, but there were no signs of the Earth Elementals being destroyed. Instead, the Earth Elementals pushed against the cannons and advanced 2 kilometers toward Utgard Castle within half an hour. How terrifying! Even if all the men in Stormwind were to be used to defend against them, it wouldn't be enough, William lamented. Valilla, who was beside him, shrugged. Fortunately, my dagger can still split the latest cannonballs. Otherwise, I'm starting to wonder if melee professions will be eliminated from the stage of history. Brawl Bearskin comforted her. Melee professions must be preserved. It's obvious that the will of planet Azeroth has given professionals different levels of power. This allows professionals to be superior to technology at certain times and in many fields. William waved his hand and turned to look at the flaming pharaoh in the magic mirror. Kale, it's up to you now. Alright, leave it to me. Kale, that still had that gentle and refined look on his face, but everyone knew that everything was different now. Kale, that Sunstrider had become the new demigod of the Alliance 4 days ago. He and his Phoenix mount, AO, had been tempered in the Land of Fire and had been recognized by the will of planet Azeroth. Now, they had completely merged to become the demigod of Phoenix and Flames. He was under Duke's command, so he was a subordinate god in the standard sense. Kale, who was sitting in the second tallest mage tower in the Dalajan, raised his hands high under the respectful gazes of the Kirin Tor counselors and the middle-ranked pharaoh. Flames formed by Phoenix fire slowly extended from his cloth shoulder armor. They did not burn his clothes at all. Instead, they were like a cape fluttering in the wind, fluttering behind him even though there was no wind. Kale, golden hair and eyebrows had long been replaced by bright red flame strands. These were all condensed from the purest fire element in the world. However, with his amazing control, every strand of hair was harmless, and its power was absolutely restrained. Even children who did not understand the elements or magic could easily pull it. It's cold. Enilus, the eldest princess of the Marcus family, had personally commented with a giggle. Kale, opened his hands slightly, and the cape behind him fluttered like a phoenix spreading its wings. An ancient elemental language floated out of Kale, mouth. Using the elements as a medium, it resounded throughout the surrounding world. I, Kale, Sunstrider, as the representative of the Supreme King of Flames, Duke Marcus, order all fire elementals to attack every earth elemental in your field of vision. The war between the 4 major elements was known as the Eternal War. Perhaps there was a brief alliance, but most of the time, once they met, they would attack each other without saying a word. It was usually difficult to stop without fighting to the death. Even low-level elemental creatures with the most basic intelligence were like this. From the north to the south, along the front line of the Alliance's defense line, countless fire elemental creatures suddenly charged out of the flaming teleportation doors. Rushing forward was like burning rocks. The earth elementals, on the other hand, gave up on charging forward. They raised their huge fists and punched the fire elemental creatures. How could the earth elementals, which sounded tangible, be invisible fire elementals? In fact, there was a saying called elemental erosion in a confrontation between elements. When there was too much earth elemental in the body of a fire elemental creature, it would be like a puddle of clear water filled with too much mud, turning into a lump of mud. The fire elemental here would turn into a clay figurine and then completely shatter. This was considered dead. If there was too much fire elemental, the earth elemental creature would also be bathed in flames, and then it would also shatter and collapse. The war between elements didn't seem bloody, but in the eyes of mages, this was the cruelest war of annihilation. Chapter 1885. The fire elementals are on our side, right? They're all mixed up, how do we fight them? The tank gunners were dumbfounded. The messenger above spat a mouthful of saliva at them. Don't joke around. Don't use holy light cannons, use pure tungsten core armor-piercing bullets. We create explosions to help our own people, our own fire elemental warriors. The bombardment resumed, and the battlefront on Utgard's side stabilized. In the face of the ferocious Neltharion clones, the demigod Kaisi made a move for the first time. He was clearly showing off his love with Caponia recently, but he acted like a lifelong member of the FFF group and directly burned them to teach those wings of light a lesson. The battle with the clones was a little lackluster. The clones had good attack, defense, and regeneration abilities, but they lacked decisive ultimate moves or special skills. At most, they could cause trouble for the Alliance and bully the Alliance subbases that did not have demigod-level combat power. Against Kaisi, defeat was only a matter of time. In fact, even Neltharion himself did not expect those clones to be able to kill the powerhouses of the Alliance. After fighting for so long, the old Wings of Light also knew that the powerhouses of the Alliance were not only very resilient, but also liked to stick together. That exaggerated teleportation link made it impossible for him to create a diversion. Unless his main body was there was no way to seal the surrounding space and cause the teleportation spell to fail. All the clones were used to buy time and stall the powerhouses of the Alliance. The real main direction of attack of the Armageddon was, of course, the Dragonbone Wilderness to the north of the New Vortex. In the face of hundreds of thousands of Earth elementals and over 10,000 adult Twilight dragons, the Dragon Sleep Temple put on a huge lineup that was rarely seen so far. In the void battlefield above the planet's atmosphere, only the minimum number of scouts and Void Fortress defense troops were left. Those dragons with rich combat experience were all called back. It was rare in history for so many dragons to gather together like today. The last time there was such a scene was back in the ancient war 10,000 years ago, when the five-colored dragons gathered and angrily attacked the Burning Legion. Now, even they themselves were shocked by the magnificent scene of the dragons flying into the air and gathering together. The red dragons, yellow dragons, and green dragons lined up in order, the blue dragons with a smaller number rushed into the sky, and the shabbiest group of adult black dragons were at the back of the formation. In any case, the 5 dragon tribes that were once divided were now united as one. It wasn't just the standard chromatic dragons. Even the lesser dragons joined the Sleeping Dragon Coalition under Alexstrasza's call. They included the archosaurs that lived in the ice and snow of Northrend, the dinosaurs of the Ungoro crater and so on. Some dragons spread their wings wide enough to blot out the sky, while some dragons were as small as mosquitoes. Regardless of whether they were old dragons that had experienced the vicissitudes of life or young dragons that had just learned how to fly, they all joined the team. This was an order from the dragon aspects. However, the dragon that took to the air first did not immediately pounce on the invading enemy. Instead, it circled above the mountains and used the air currents to wait for its brothers to arrive. These dragons filled the sky, forming layers of ranks from high to low. They circled in a regular route to avoid colliding with each other. On the ground, large batches of Draconians and half-Draconians were pouring out of the Dragon Slumber Shrine's gates one after another. They formed a neat square formation and formed the core of the defensive line on the ground. On the other hand, the terrestrial dinosaurs that could not fly consciously circled around and gathered on both sides, tentatively forming a formation. Faced with this scene, anyone who witnessed this scene would think that they had seen the end of the world. Perhaps it really was the end of the world. The members of the dragon race knew that the great traitor Nesario had done all kinds of evil. This deadly poisonous thorn was stuck in the throats of every dragon, and no one would be indifferent to that kind of stinging pain. The dragon's blood was boiling, and their thunderous roars resounded through the sky. Everyone was waiting for the upcoming battle. The enemy's boss, Nesario, had not yet appeared, so naturally, there would not be a Dragon King on the Sleeping Dragon Coalition side. At this stage, the four-colored dragon race's second-in-command, led by Krasis, was holding down the fort. Krasus did not know that he had escaped death because of Du's interference. He was shuttling back and forth between the various phalanxes with Kalego's fiancée, Matagosa, and the other second-in-command, coordinating the various dragon race armies. Krasus was a little ashamed. The dragon slumber shrine had long been accustomed to magical communication, but the other more primitive dragon race still remained at the level of shouting orders. Fortunately, the command of the opposing earth elemental creatures was even worse, otherwise, there was no telling what would have happened. Compared to the chaotic dragon coalition, the human fleet hovering in the sky further north was much quieter and orderly. This fleet, 10,000 meters away, would provide the long-range support that the dragon race lacked the most. Krasus was worried, so he used magic to confirm it. His spirit connected to the magic network. "Your Majesty Proudmoore, can you hear me?" "Very clear, Krasus." Jaina sat helplessly on a throne that was obviously arranged in the bridge. "That's right." The Alliance was really lacking fleet commanders. It should be said that there was a shortage of commander-level talents with more than 100,000 people. Originally, Jaina was a standard mage girl, but she had to be pulled in. She was now sitting on the flagship of the Alliance's new, Iron Cross fleet, Bismarck. Jaina did not know what the hell Bismarck was. The name was set by Du Moke, and she could not change it. In other aspects, Duque was very tolerant, but when it came to the naming of the ship, he definitely had the final say. This steel beast hovering in the sky not only had the traditional cannons of the Alliance, but it also had a very exaggerated thing that needed a Breaking Dawn Archmage to control. Jaina sighed. "What about the Dragon King?" "Still arguing, but there will be a result soon." At the highest level of the Dragon Slumber Shrine, the 5 Dragon Kings were still arguing. "Damn! Is Duque not back yet?" Alexstrasza was indeed a little anxious. Her red eyes stared at Nozdormu. The Space Dragon King was still expressionless. "I will know when he completes the mission. Just don't get lost in the river of time like last time. I heard that he came back for a few years. The Dragon Slumber Shrine can't wait for a few years." The Red Dragon Queen had the urge to flip the table. "Sister, calm down. It is our Emerald Dragon Holy Land that is under attack now." Isra still looked calm and composed. The Green Dragon Holy Land was by the sea. It and the new Hearth Valley next to it naturally became the first target of Nesario's Armageddon army. However, because Vashj was personally guarding the shallow waters by the sea, there was no way for Neltharion to let the Earth Elementals land by walking on the seabed. He could only use the human cannon method to shoot batches of Earth Elementals ashore. Chapter 1886. Unexpectedly, Isra was kind enough to allow the Alliance to build a fortress next to the Holy Land, which helped the Green Dragons instead. In the new Hearth Valley to the east of the Emerald Holy Land, Duque worked overtime before he left. He asked the Alliance to deploy more than 500, dual 113mm anti-aircraft cannons, on the southern coastal mountain wall. These anti-aircraft cannons had a larger caliber than the main cannon of a tank. Although they did not have the high firing rate of the 40mm bang-bang cannon used by the warship, which was about 1 round per second, this new type of anti-aircraft cannon was very powerful. They formed a dense anti-air net, and almost half of the Earth elemental creatures that were thrown out were shot down. As long as they hit, most of the stone people flying in the air would fall into the sea. Sea beasts like the giant octopus that had been waiting under the water would swarm up and drag the Earth elemental creatures away to kill them. This greatly bought time for the Dragon Sleep Temple to set up the formation. When a large number of Earth elemental creatures poured into the new Hearth Valley, the Alliance abandoned this fortress, and their personnel began to withdraw to the Emerald Holy Land next door. The Naga troops led by the Deepwater Lord Karathres stayed behind to fight the Earth elemental creatures. At the top of the Dragon Sleep Temple, Alexstrasza was finally convinced. Isra said, "I know your determination to defend the Dragon Sleep Temple, sister. In fact, we all have the same feeling. But without the soul of the dragon, we can't kill Nethario at all. So my opinion is, unless Nethario attacks the top of the Dragon Sleep Temple, we don't make a move." The Red Dragon sister was extremely conflicted. This is not the first time. In order to create the strongest weapon in history, we must dedicate our essence to fight against the most powerful traitor in the history of the five-colored dragons, Nethario. If that's not enough, we still have claws, teeth, and other weapons to attack him. Isn't that right? Isra's calm words calmed his sister's restless mood. Alexstrasza smiled bitterly. "I suddenly feel like you're more like the head of the five-colored dragons than me." "No, it's just that you're under too much pressure, sister." Nozdormu had facial paralysis most of the time. He was a generation lower than Kalegos, so he couldn't talk to him. Onyxia, on the other hand, became bolder. "It's okay, we can still order the wilderness demigod around. Although those guys are a little weak, they can still hold on for a long time." The only demigod in the wilderness who could fight in the air was Avienna. In fact, the Raven Goddess was far inferior to the weakest of the five dragon aspects, Kalegos. Instead of letting them be bombarded by Nethario outside, it was better to place them on the first floor of the entrance to the Wormrest Shrine. The powerful spatial seal made it so that no matter who entered the Dragon Sleep Shrine's main entrance, they would have to walk. Alexstrasza's face turned red. "If we get attacked there, then the Dragon Slumber Temple will lose all face." Isra was rather practical. "Didn't we already lose face when Nethario betrayed us?" Her sister was right. The Red Dragon Queen was speechless. But at the end of the day, everyone unconsciously shifted their attention back to Duque. Even Isra was muttering to himself, "Duque, you bastard. I won't forgive you for coming back so late." Onyxia, on the other hand, did not seem to care. After entering the Wormrest Shrine, she was basically in human form. She had no intention of being a dragon at all. She seemed to be very leisurely crossing her legs, her right index finger twirling the tip of her long black curly hair, twirling and twirling it. Her face revealed a honey of trust that the other dragons could not understand. "It's okay, until the world is destroyed, I will absolutely believe in Duque." No one knew that at this moment, this once incomparably cunning female black dragon was undergoing the final interrogation of her dragon heart. This concerned whether she would really open her heart and completely believe in a man in the future. The ancient dragons all knew that the Dragon King could not be mobilized. Otherwise, once they needed to inject power into the dragon's soul and were held up, it would not be fun. They could only rely on themselves, and the alliance of the mortal races that many dragons were not willing to believe in more than a decade ago. After the Destruction Army realized that attacking the Emerald Dragon Holy Land in the southeast of the Wormrest Shrine was not effective, they first destroyed the Walrus people's Moyaki port in order to have a better landing, and then went all the way north. Although tens of thousands of stone men were left to attack the Azure Dragon Holy Land in the southwest of the Wormrest Shrine, the main force was divided into two groups. One group went straight through the two Holy Lands and went straight to the Wormrest Shrine. The other larger group went around to the west, through the snow-covered drifting snow forest, and attacked the Wormrest Shrine. In the flagship command room of Bismarck, Jaina sighed. "What's wrong?" Aegwin asked. Jaina rested her chin on her right hand and propped her head up. "It'll be fine if Duque doesn't go for a few years this time." "Phew. Aren't you all full of energy to prove that the Alliance can fight against evil without Duque?" Aegwin laughed. "Nowadays, in the Alliance, that's a paradox." Jaina laughed lightly. Holding the weapons and equipment that Duque led the way in developing, using the taxes that Duque brought in to revitalize the economy to nurture an army, and shouting, "We can do it without Duque, isn't that a joke?" Aegwin shrugged. "That's true. Alright, there's no time to be sad. At least we have to hold on and make sure that the situation doesn't collapse. Jaina looked at the magical screens that had a sci-fi feel to it, and saw the position of the enemy's main force. She waved her hand. All fleet main cannons, prepare to fire. A minute later, the sound of cannons that seemed to come from the distant horizon faintly came to the dragons, and then countless cannonballs that were as dense as a swarm of locusts whistled past not far from the feet of the flying dragons. It wasn't just the roar of cannons, but also the roar of modern technology. Artillery skills that had been tempered thousands of times, coupled with the dual guidance of technology and magic, guided each cannonball through the space between the flying dragons and the earth dragons, blasting into the group of twilight dragons in the sky. It was almost a replica of the aerial battle between the Fearless Fortress and Utgard Castle. The new Holy Light version of the tungsten core armor-piercing shell had a miraculous effect on the twilight dragons. After 3 rounds of rapid firing, the twilight dragon formation in the sky became a pitiful basket. Krasis was a little excited and shouted with magic amplification, "It's time. Chromatic dragons, attack." This was the agreed signal. 3 rounds of simultaneous firing, and then immediately snatching control of the air. Tens of thousands of dragons flapped their wings and accelerated. Like countless heavy machine guns, they ferociously plunged into the group of twilight dragons that had become sparse and messy. The enemy's scattered formation and unstable morale gave the Sleeping Dragon Alliance a great advantage. Chapter 1887. On the other hand, Krasis and the other ancient dragons were entangled with Nisario's avatars. They flapped their wings and made all sorts of difficult hovers in the air. Some of them even made sudden stops and flew backward. They kept using their dragon breaths to destroy the ever-growing avatars of Darkwing. Of course, it looked a little futile. After so many battles, both sides basically had a pattern. The size of the avatars of Darkwing also depended on the size of the avatars. If they were twice the size of an ordinary ancient dragon, then the ancient dragon could still win with numbers. 3 to 5 times the size of the avatars could be dealt with by a single guardian, aspect dragon, or demigod of the Alliance or the Sleeping Dragon Alliance. If it was more than 5 times, they would have to gather many big shots to deal with it. Now, these were basically big guys that were about 5 times the size, but the demigods of the Sleeping Dragon Alliance could not attack due to special reasons. This was really hard on the ancient dragons. However, it was not like the Alliance did not have any countermeasures. No one noticed that Jaina's flagship, Bismarck, had already sneaked forward. It was less than 2 kilometers away from the main battlefield where Nisario's avatars were. This was definitely a very close distance for an aerial battle. No one discovered the Bismarck, because the 4 ancient green dragons, Laysan, Amalise, Tyrell, and Isodra, had joined hands to create a magic formation that perfectly concealed the human battleship with its illusion and aura concealment. Back then, the 4 nightmare dragons had always played the role of the backbone of the Green Dragon army after escaping the fate of death. Under Isra's most trusted male green dragon, second-in-command Irenicus, they were the most capable of fighting in the Green Dragon army. Those avatars that were not directly controlled by Nisario did not notice the danger that was close at hand at this time. On Bismarck, Master Craftsman Jurbin was sweating profusely. He nervously paid attention to the data of the battleship, and finally nodded at Jaina. Jaina pressed a red button on the flagship beside the captain's seat. The moment she pressed it, the entire battleship began to change shape. As a test ship, Bismarck was a rare flying battleship that was purely powered by magic power. After abandoning the high-powered propellers pulled by diesel engines, it used an anti-gravity magic engine similar to the Dalagen's. Being completely connected to the weave also meant that without it, the entire ship would be like a stranded whale, unable to move at all. On the other hand, as long as it was within the range of the weave, with the support of Pharaoh who had extremely high authority, the Bismarck would be the representative of the weave. The upper and lower layers of the ship have separated. The connection to the weave is working. Confirmation of highest authority in the weave. Magic circuit warm-up test. Test normal. In the command deck, a group of female communications soldiers and radiant moon mages were busy. As one of the greatest experiments in combining technology and magic, Bismarck was displaying its extraordinary side to the world. The largest hull, which was 241.55 meters long and 36 meters wide, was neatly opened near the waterline of a ship. The opening was so flat that one could tell that it wasn't a crack, but that it had the structure to open itself. It looked like the main body of the ship was slowly separating from the bottom of the ship. There were still some metal pumps and hooks connecting the upper and lower parts of the ship, looking a little like the fangs of a dragon. However, the huge cannon that was exposed in the air and sandwiched between the two sections of the ship made the four ancient dragons who were on the verge of becoming the nightmare dragons feel their hearts palpitate. This huge cannon that was more than 200 meters long and 10 meters in diameter almost pierced through the entire hull. It was obviously something that had nothing to do with science. Anyone with the slightest bit of elemental sensing would be able to sense that the weave had opened up 12 huge ports in the void around it. The mana that these ports could send through every second was equivalent to the mana of an adult blue dragon. As Duque's woman, Jaina had the highest status among the secondary controllers of the weave. She could use as much mana as she wanted, but it didn't exceed the upper limit of her control. If not for the four ancient green dragons acting as a cover, just the mana fluctuations from the weave would be enough to make the army of destruction jump in anger. A huge amount of mana was quickly injected into the huge cannon in the belly of the Bismarck, charging it. The frost element from the water elemental realm quickly lit up the mysterious Titan runes on the cannon's body. As if it was a lighting ceremony at night, the runes on the cannon lit up from the stern all the way to the muzzle at the bow. In the command room, Gerben was sweating profusely as he stared at the data interface of the various main cannons. The pressure on the metal walls of Area K3 is too high. If we go any further, it'll explode. Got it. Jaina's face was expressionless as beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. The welding process for Area B7 is not up to standard. Damn it. I'm going to kill the brat in charge of that area. Gerben continued to shout. Got it. Jaina was furious. Controlling such a powerful new magic cannon was definitely not as easy as others thought. Magic cannons were nothing new. The Dalajan had always had them. Just like how traditional cannons were divided into calibers and ammunition, magic cannons were also divided into different grades. The Dalajan's old magic cannons were powered by stored mana. It was just like how Duque had stored his spare mana in magic crystals a long time ago and used it to save the day when necessary. This method was relatively more stable and safe. However, in order to not be like how the Dalajan and Kel Thuzad's Naxxramas bombarded each other, the Dalajan magic cannons had no choice but to reduce the power of the magic cannons. The modified magic cannons on the Bismarck were even more daring. The body of the cannon was only a medium to temporarily store mana. A large amount of elemental filtration and stabilization work was left to the weave. This was only an experimental stage. In reality, Khadgar, the manager of the weave, and Jaina, the person with the highest authority in the outside world of the weave, were working together to launch the magic cannons. If the experiment was successful, the Alliance would be able to equip magic cannons on a large scale in the future. After all, cannons that used TNT were considered kinetic weapons. Compared to energy weapons like magic cannons, both had their own advantages. Walking on two legs was much better than relying on just one move. 80% charged, but the cannon can't hold on much longer. Gerben shouted again. All right. Sigh of the Aurora Goddess, fire. Jaina finally punched the red firing button. The huge cylindrical cannon trembled. The next moment, the unique white light of the frost element poured out from the round obsidian cannon's muzzle. This new type of ore collected from Uldum displayed excellent resistance to the cold. In an instant it was as if the goddess of winter had descended. Chapter 1888. The white iciness conquered the distance of 2,000 meters in one breath and shot towards the target. The two Neltharian clones that were lured into the muzzle were hit directly. The fangs of the white icy-cold energy directly bit through the dragon skin of the Deathwing clone. The dragon-like limbs that were still shaking and baring their fangs a moment ago became stiff and motionless. The cold of absolute zero penetrated every cell in the body of the Deathwing clone in 0.01 seconds, and what was even more terrifying was the elemental erosion that followed. If anyone could slice the body tissue of the Deathwing clone and put it under a microscope, they would clearly see that the originally violent, rapidly proliferating, and dividing cells had suddenly become as slow as an old woman. The water in the cells all turned into icicles, piercing the cell wall of every cell like a hedgehog. The same thing was happening to every single cell in his body. The huge dragon body that was noisy and full of disgusting shaking a second ago became deathly still under the sweep of the cold current. Without a sound, the gigantic dragon clone turned into a large ice sculpture, which made the dragon feel very unhappy. The ice sculpture that lost its support fell from a height of 1,000 meters to the ground. Crack! The two Deathwing clones were directly shattered. Oh, 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 oh. The shocking scene in the magic mirror directly made the Alliance soldiers who witnessed this scene reach a climax. They clenched their fists, raised their arms, and shouted loudly. Confirmed that targets 1 and 3 have been completely destroyed. The voice of the monitor girl spread throughout the bridge of the Bismarck. Phew! Jaina and Jurban's tense hearts finally relaxed. At this point, killing a Deathwing clone was not something to be proud of. What was worth being proud of was the fact that with the combination of magic and technology, he had killed a demigod-level monster at the Breaking Dawn level. Killing enemies of a higher level was something that could only be encountered by chance since ancient times. In particular, it was even more difficult to normalize this kind of behavior. Under Duque's suggestion, mortals were working hard to make this impossible possible with their own wisdom and creativity. Before Duque left for ancient times, he once said, Azeroth has its own planet's will. When a planet is plagued with disasters, the planet will release the restrictions it has set up, allowing more mortals to have the space and opportunities to break through. It was foreseeable that there would be more Breaking Dawn wizards one day. Although the streets won't be filled with Breaking Dawns, I reckon that it won't be a problem for the Alliance to nurture a dozen or so Breaking Dawns. With just a Breaking Dawn Great Wizard holding the fort and the support of the giant warships and cannons, they had the battle prowess to threaten a demigod. What a magnificent feat of leaps and bounds! Being immersed in this magnificent feat and legend, the great gnome craftsman Jurban felt a sense of bliss. Jaina was the only one who was more clear-headed. Transfer the battle data immediately. Bismarck left the scene at top speed. Nesario will probably go crazy. We have to save this prototype as much as possible. Weapons that had not been tested in actual combat were mostly trash. As long as the experiment was generally successful, the subsequent modifications would be a piece of cake, provided that the most crucial prototype was preserved. Nesario seemed to have also discovered the need to destroy this strange human creation. More clones began to emerge from the southern vortex of Dragonbone Wasteland. At that moment, no one noticed that the Alliance's plan was still going on. What is the most important thing in modern warfare? Air supremacy. Neither the Sleeping Dragon Coalition Army nor the Armageddon Army realized why the Alliance was so eager to eliminate the Twilight Dragons in the air. Although the Twilight Dragons could be mass-produced like instant noodles, the number of Twilight Dragons that could be dispatched per unit of time was limited. This depended on the number of twilight dragons that could serve as commanders, as well as the upper limit of Nesario's willpower. Even the sleeping dragon temple itself did not notice that Duque had thrown out a set of calculations before leaving. If the base number of adult twilight dragons was set to 1, then the combat power of a twilight dragon was equivalent to that of an ancient dragon. Together with the adult dragons that he could control, there were basically 300. Then, the maximum number that Nesario could command fluctuated between 12,000 and 20,000. This depended on the distance between his main body and the group of twilight dragons, as well as the complexity of the situation. This meant that Nesario could only command about 10,000 adult dragons to fight at most. Any more and the undisciplined twilight dragons would let loose and act recklessly. There were 3 major battles going on at the same time. Once the twilight dragons in the sky above the main battlefield were cleared, a new batch of twilight dragons would replace them, and there would be a vacuum above the battlefield for about 5 minutes. At an altitude of 4,000 meters, a giant transport ship of the Alliance began to drop magic nuclear bombs. In fact, this thing had nothing to do with nuclear energy. At this stage, the Alliance was far from being a nuclear, in terms of power supply or science and technology. This could not stop Duque's yearning for big bombs. Since Nesario also knew that he could not destroy the sleeping dragon temple with just the twilight dragons, and instead bet on the earth elementals from the deep rock continent, he just had to blow up the earth elementals. Little Fatty number 2 fell with a loud bang. Not a single twilight dragon, not even Nesario himself, who was hiding in the dark, realized how terrifying this magic bomb was. The last time the Alliance sent out such a big bomb, it was during the wrath of the Lich King, when the tribe rebelled. Winterspring was a cold and remote place, and there were no twilight believers. When the iconic mushroom cloud rose, Nesario was dumbfounded. On the land covered in ice and snow, colorful flames were dancing on the ground and in the air. A few seconds later, the terrifying shock wave set off by the mixture of elements and explosives swept over. Shaking, explosions, ear-piercing noises, everything became a symbol of the tragic loss of the Earth Elemental Army. In the open space where the Earth Elemental creatures gathered, Little Fatty number 2 exploded in the middle of the giant Earth Elemental elite group that had gathered there. The core area was directly turned into a huge crater with a diameter of 500 meters. Naturally, the Earth Elementals in that place did not even have their bones left. With a series of loud bangs, rubble flew in the army of stone people, and the stones that were blown away fell on the heads and bodies of their companions like hailstones. There were no continuous screams. The Earth Elemental creatures landed on the beach in silence, and died silently. This was just the beginning, not the end. More and more Little Fatty bombs were thrown down, and the ground rose into the sky, dazzling the dragons. Finally, the real Nesario roared and rose into the air from the huge sea vortex. His voice echoed over and over again in the entire Dragonbone Waste. My brothers and sisters. It's time to settle the score. Chapter 1889. Never reason with a madman, or he will pull you into the world of Deepwell Ice and kill you instantly with his better skills. It was clear that he was the first to be driven mad by the whispers of the ancient gods and betrayed the dragon slumber shrine. However, in his long-winded description, it became that after the battle at the Dark Portal, the 4 dragon aspects had cooperated with the despicable and shameless Duke Marcus and joined forces with the rebellious Onyxia to murder him in order to seize his throne. Now he was the one who set off the flames of revenge. Alexstrasza, who was watching this scene from the top of the Wormrest shrine, gritted her teeth so hard that they almost broke. Nonsense. Nozdormu was not angry at all. It doesn't matter what he says. No dragon in their right mind will approve of him. What we are worried about now is whether this Nesario is the real deal and whether our allies can stop him. Isra stared at the Death Wing in the magic mirror for a long time, then smiled bitterly and shook his head. I can't tell. He and his clone also have the same crazy will. He is no longer an existence that I can distinguish between the real and the fake with my power. However, the Dragon Kings were certain that at least the Deathwing in the magic mirror was very similar to the real deal. He also had the constantly proliferating dragon limbs like the clone. This was like a kind of decaying scabies that completely affected the city. The biggest difference between him and the other clones was not his size, but the black source armor on his body. This mysterious black metal could only be found in the newly developed Aldum and other places. The only thing that was known was that this source ore not only had the effect of stabilizing certain special energies, but it was also very hard. It was so hard that even the Dragon King's claws could not easily pierce through it. At this moment, after seeing Nisario's iron chin, Onyxia said, "It's my father, there's no doubt about it." Alexstrasza's eyes lit up. "You feel the blood connection?" "No," Duque mentioned the term iron chin. "I didn't know before, but I know now. It's him." The Black Dragon Princess was very sure. The Red Dragon Queen frowned. After a few seconds, she sighed. "Tell the other dragons to make way, don't try to stop this Nisario. Let him charge into the first floor of the Dragon Sleep Shrine." They were betting on the god of the wilderness and the guardians. With just one command, Deathwing had gone on a killing spree. It was unknown what instructions Zoth had given him, but Nisario seemed to want to vent the bitterness of being suppressed for the past few days, or as if he had begun to let loose after Duque was not around. After he appeared, he did not go straight to the Dragon Slumber Shrine, but instead started a massacre in the sky. It was even swifter than a comet that flew across the sky and even more blazing than the sun that shone on the earth. Just the flapping of its gigantic wings in the air and the huge waves of flames that it created were enough to burn an ordinary adult pentashade giant dragon's body with lust and make it fall to the ground while screaming in pain. Not only the chromatic dragons, but all the dragon-type creatures in the air, including the Twilight Dragon, were burned to ashes. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. The entire sky of the Dragonbone Wilderness reverberated with Neltharion's wanton laughter. My brother. My sisters. For the forgotten hatred. For an even greater world, I, Deathwing, have come. What about you? Do you, the Guardians, have to hide in the shell of the Dragon Slumber Shrine like a tortoise? The Dragon Slumber Shrine's response was only silence. In the sky, as long as the dragons could fly away, even the dinosaurs and other vassals of the dragons on the ground ran away. They were only responsible for fighting the Earth Elemental Army, and nothing else. Ha ha ha. Do you think you can hide from me just by hiding? And, Duke Marcus. Do you think your little tricks will work again this time, and you can trick me with a despicable trap? Deathwing raised its chin that was emitting a metallic luster and continued to laugh wildly. Ha! I'm different. I'm really different. In the midst of his laughter, Deathwing flapped his wings. It seemed like he was flying normally, but who knew that the earth would suddenly erupt with a loud rumble. For a moment, the earth shook. The earth was collapsing and cracking, and the Dragonbone Wilderness, which had been frozen for the past hundreds of millions of years, suddenly flashed with an ominous glow. In the northwest and northeast directions of the Dragon Slumber Shrine, there was a huge bulge. At first, it looked like two mountains rising slowly from the ground. Then, the mouths of the two mountains split open and spewed out thousands of tons of blazing magma. The two huge volcanic craters were hitting the space barrier of the Dragon Slumber Shrine at a high temperature unimaginable to mortals. Impossible! Alexstrasza and Isra exclaimed at the same time. This was just the beginning, not the end. Deathwing, who was hovering in the sky, continued to laugh wildly. Idiot! Where do you think my clone came from? Now, I'll tell you, his wings split open. They broke into thousands of pieces, and then, with a powerful and unparalleled momentum, like a cover covering the sky and earth, poured down on the circular area with a diameter of more than 10 kilometers below him. Whether it was the earth dragons, dragon men, draconians who could not escape in time, or the dragon remains that had been sleeping in this wilderness for who knows how many years and had long become bones, all of them underwent shocking changes. Roar, 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 the Tyrannosaurus Rex suddenly grew another head. It did not look like a dinosaur, but a typical black dragon head. The horned dragon with long, sharp horns suddenly split open its abdomen, and turned into a terrifying monster with more than 5 mouths full of sharp teeth. The skeletons of dragons that had lost their lives for more than 10,000 years suddenly grew flesh and blood. The body with countless mouths, teeth, and tongues could not be considered a dragon at all, but a deformed one. Sinestra, who had died in the previous invasion, as well as the leaders of the Twilight Dragons, Cenarion and Variona, all stood up shakily again. After they regained their mobility, the first thing they did was to attack the dragons that were still normal near them. No matter how Nesario tormented his mutated body, it could be clearly seen that all the corpses, regardless of race, had been turned into treasures by him. There were so many humorous WIRMS, and a casual estimate would put the total number at more than 100,000. 100,000 corpse dragons and mutant dragons. Regardless of their quality, just the number alone far exceeded the total number of ice dragons that the Calamity Army had at its peak. Control? No need. Just these corpse dragons and mutant dragons alone. You shameless blasphemer, Alexstrasza was completely enraged when she saw this scene. Come on. Alexstrasza and Duque. I've already made my move. Didn't you want to plot against me? What tricks do you have? Just use them. Nesario yelled wildly. At this moment, Nozdormu's poker face could no longer remain calm. He said softly, Duque, what are you waiting for? You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.